to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This
Welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6, and a very, very good morning to you. It's Tuesday, the 11th of March. I can't believe we are sort of, marching forward, as to say, that we are getting very, very much closer to spring. The weather is improving. It is a bit cold, but it is a bit dark. But yet, we are feeling full this morning here at Morning Glory with a sense of renewal, because there are lots of good things going on. There's also lots of bad things going on. Bob Seeley joins me this morning, former Tory MP from the Isle of Wight. Very good morning to you, Bob. We've got loads to talk about. 2 ships in the night we're going to talk about. I mean, how is it possible, if you're driving a massive, great big tanker, that when you see another great big tanker, that you don't sort of go around it? I mean, I wonder whether foul play is at play. It tells me on the front page of the Telegraph that foul play has not been ruled out after the US oil tanker collision in the North Sea. It's off the coast of Hull. There's aviation fuel leaking into the water. I haven't seen any sign of Just Stop Oil, by the way, or Just Stop Aviation Fuel. They're not chaining themselves to anything. They're not sitting down in the middle of the road. They don't seem to be noticing it at all, which is rather bizarre, isn't it, considering that there is, in fact, quite a lot of environmental damage being done to the North Sea. We'll come back to that. Also, we'll be talking about the migrant who hates Jews. This is a guy who came to this country on Thursday, filmed himself arriving. He was finally arrested the night before last, I think, and he's now being held. But the big question, of course, now is what happens to him now? He's been filmed, and he's filmed himself being very, very anti-Semitic. The word is on the street that basically he will be probably now given a home. He'll probably end up staying in this country for the rest of his life. Will he be deported by the Labour government? Very, very unlikely. We'll talk about that, of course, as well. The BBC has spent £5 million on a whole series of investigations into the various scandals that they have been found themselves to be up against. Also, another interesting stat, a phone is stolen every 7 minutes in London. That's how bad it is. We'll be talking about the Saudi talks to mend a rift with Kyiv. We'll be talking about Ukraine. We'll be talking about the latest situation with that. And we'll be talking about the markets this morning, because Donald Trump and his threats to put tariffs on, and possibly the retaliation for those threats, is causing the markets to tumble. I think the Nasdaq is falling at a bigger rate than it's fallen for a long time, and one of the other markets in America is down to an all-time low for the first time in 2 years. Also, 4,000 dinghy illegals have arrived in this country just this year alone. That is a new record. Also, we're going to have the story that foreigners commit a quarter of sex crimes, despite the fact that they are not, in fact, necessarily a quarter of the population. Also, what is going on with reform? We're still waiting for the answers. We saw an interview last night with Rupert Lowe on Dan Wootton's show, an extraordinary interview in which he did not come across as a crazed old man, did not come across as a man who is in any way suffering from dementia or anything else. He seemed very solid. Let's get some views on reform right here.
As a reform voter, for me, this, to be honest, is the nail in the coffin.
I'll never vote for them again because I don't believe Rupert Lowe is exact as what they say he is. He just doesn't come across that kind of man.
Reform, Farage and Lowe, I mean, I suppose the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
The truth, as ever, lies somewhere in the middle. It's our job to try and figure out what it is. Bob Seeley's here. Bob, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Should we kick things off with reforms? That's really interesting in getting your view on it, really. I mean, it seems to be an incredible act of self-harm that they're carrying out, doesn't it?
It is, and it's slightly difficult. Look, I respect Nigel Farage. I'm not going to say otherwise, but I do find it slightly difficult to believe him when he says people fall out with me.
Yeah.
He has a track record of falling out with people and then forcing them out.
And then they disappear.
Yeah, and I have to say, the two standout parliamentarians who are not party leaders, the two standout parliamentarians of this parliament thus far is Rob Jenrick for the Conservatives, because I think he's doing an awesome job.
I think so.
And Rupert Lowe.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not, as I said, not going to pretend otherwise. Rupert Lowe has got very, very sensible things to say on a lot of stuff, especially mass immigration. And I'm afraid to say I do not believe Nigel Farage and the way that they are treating Rupert Lowe. I just think they are shooting themselves in the foot. There's only 5 of them. There are only 5 of them, and he is half the performance of their parliamentary party.
Right.
And they basically said, "You've got dementia." I don't believe that either, because he's very coherent. And they're forcing him out. And I think this is yet more internecine warfare when Conservatives of whatever party have got to be focusing their eye on this dire Labour government.
Yes, exactly right. And also, if you're going to do what you're doing to Rupert Lowe, just cut it off at the quick. You know, just go, look, I'm sorry, you've breached some kind of rule. We're going to kick you out of the party. Don't drag it out and make it. I mean, I said this yesterday. Don't make out that you're going through some HR procedure. Don't make out that you've called the police. I said to Gawain Towler yesterday, who used to be Nigel Farage's sort of senior commandment kind of assistant. I said, look, what are they doing calling the police? I mean, that's not what reform's supposed to be doing.
To be honest, and I read the accusations as well, and basically, look, if I understand correctly, these people were making these accusations after there had been a disciplinary process against them. Look, I'd love to see Rupert Lowe in the Conservative Party.
Is there a chance of that, do you think?
Well, I hope so, but I mean, look, it's a reminder of the fact that as much as Nigel Farage may be superficially attractive, actually what we need to get rid of this terrible Labour government is a reformed Conservative Party, and I hope Rupert Lowe is part of that reformed Conservatism in future.
A lot of people think this could be the end for reform as well, and that, you know, Nigel will move on and go off to work in America with Donald Trump, and where does that leave them?
Look, they've got Rupert Lowe's good MP and Richard Tice, good MP. I'm not sure necessarily Farage's natural habitat is Parliament, frankly, and I don't think he's shined particularly there. Rupert Lowe has, Richard Tice has. They're both mainstream Conservatives.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Let's talk about this bizarre story in the North Sea. Hellfire is the front page of the Sun this morning. North Sea disaster. Cyanide apparently is aboard the ship that hit the tanker full of US war jet fuel. This is an American ship which was carrying, I understand it anyway, to be aviation fuel, which was intended to be given to US forces, I presume in the Gulf or, and wherever else. But it seems extraordinary, doesn't it? I mean, I've watched a little kind of mock-up of how it could have happened. It was foggy, apparently, but nevertheless, you know, these ships have got incredible sort of navigation radar, don't they?
They have radar. It is very, very difficult in a big ocean to crash 2 very large ships.
You would think.
With a lot of radar.
Yes.
Unless the crew are just so incompetent and all of them are half asleep.
Yeah. Which could also happen,
possibly, or it is sabotage. And if you want to sabotage stuff, you know, actually, sometimes it's not too difficult in modern life if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, according to a piece in the Telegraph this morning, foul play not ruled out in the crash between a US military tanker and a container ship in the North Sea. It's the Stena Immaculate on a short-term charter to the US Navy's Military Sea Lift Command. It was carrying 35 million litres of Jet A1, a type of aviation fuel from a refinery in Greece, and then the ship that hit it, the So Long, is a Portuguese-flagged vessel carrying 15 containers of toxic sodium cyanide. I mean, it's not inconceivable that whoever did this, if they did it deliberately, wanted to create a sort of economic and environmental disaster.
Yes, but even the fact that it's a Portuguese flag ship, it's not from some sort of, it's from a European. It's a flag.
It's not from like Houthi land or anything, is it?
No,
as we like to call it here at Morning Glory. But it's not come through the Suez Canal. It's not. It doesn't appear to be manned by people from Bangladesh or anything like that. We're not really sure. But it's very, very bizarre, isn't it?
It is bizarre. I hope it's not, in a way. I don't know. I mean, I hope it's not deliberate, because it's pretty vile if it is. But if it's an accident, it's incompetence on a truly massive scale.
Yeah, absolutely right. And as I say, I mean, one of the things that's always interesting to me is whenever these kinds of things happen, where are Just Stop Oil? Why have they not been out demonstrating, throwing paint over somebody, or possibly hanging around at the Maritime Commission or something? Wherever it is that they think they should be demonstrating, why are they not demonstrating?
Yeah, it's just like people who demonstrate for peace. Well, where were they when the Russians invaded?
Yes.
Where were they when Hamas started killing Jews? They're just.
Where are they now? I mean, a lot of people now are, and particularly from the Israeli side, asking where are the demonstrations up and down the Western world when Syrians are now being killed at a massive rate? Christians, Druze, all sorts of different religions. Alawites.
I saw the pictures of Trafalgar Square looking very unfilled.
Yes.
All social media when people go and do the pictures of Parliament Square, Trafalgar, where are the protesters?
No.
If it's not Israel, they're not interested.
If it's not Israel, they're not interested. Speaking of which, front page of the Mail, a migrant who came into this country on Thursday of last week, Palestinian Abu Wadi, called for death to all Jews. Thankfully, he was actually picked up the night before last.
I'm so cynical about this. The only reason he's picked up is because he's on the front page of the Mail on Sunday. Well done, the Mail on Sunday. Very good story. How many of his cousins and brothers are here? How many of these nut jobs are getting in because they're not on the front page of the Mail? This is absolutely the exception to the rule. How many thousands of these people? I mean, you were making mention of it. The percentage of men involved in sexual crime from about a dozen countries, way out of line with everything else, way out of line with the norm, way out of line with lots of other countries as well. And they're all getting in, whether it's people who are going to commit crimes against women in this country or children, or nut jobs like this idiot.
Right, indeed. And of course the big question now is, and they're asking on the front of the Mail this morning, is the UK now stuck with him? Because you can imagine that the Lord Hermers of this world will be lining up
be all over
to say, well, of course he can't go back to Gaza now because he's in danger. He's now been made into a sort of
maybe he hasn't killed a Jew yet, so they don't want him home.
No, exactly. And I mean, he will no doubt have a right to a family life. He will
the laws will be all over the asylum case.
He'll pick up a cat or two, sit
he'll inherit a dog
somewhere in Ealing, and he'll go, no, I can't leave the cat, obviously, keep me here.
He'll get married to a first cousin, no doubt.
I mean, and I saw some stats over the weekend that we alone are the country in Europe which sort of allows people to settle with so much more ease and alacrity than anywhere else.
I know, and it's really bad. And if you look at the asylum, the Conservatives changed this, but at one point, 50% of Albanian males were getting political asylum in this country.
Yeah.
And the Albanians, sadly, are some of the people most associated with organised crime. 50% of them were getting asylum. And we tightened up the rules. The system is not fit for purpose.
No, it really isn't. And when is it going to be changed?
Well, not under this government.
No,
not a chance.
Over in America, of course, we're still seeing swathes being cut of red tape. Elon Musk was talking yesterday about this. Let's have a look.
Well, the announcements about it, I mean, it'd be nice to see actually the effect, and just shutting down whole chunks of government without thinking of consequences. I'm all for shrinking the civil service, but you've got to think through some of this stuff a little bit better than they have, because then either it's going to cost you, or you're not going to deliver on the promises you made.
Right.
So you need to give some thought to what you're doing.
Yes. Do you think then that some of what Musk is doing is a little bit too quick, too soon, too fast?
But if you look at what's happening, they're all beginning to fight it in the federal court, in the state courts.
Right.
So there's going to start being a pushback, and some of this stuff may take years. And so Elon Musk will advertise it on Twitter, and everyone will think it's happened. It may not have happened.
Right.
It's a bit like this Labour government saying, "Oh, we put out a press release saying we've done this, so we've done it."
Yeah,
No,
we've got sort of, you know, £100 million coming through the Sovereign Wealth Fund or whatever it's called, when in fact they haven't got anything coming through. You know, it's literally 50p, which apparently turns out to be our 50p. All right, well, here's Elon Musk talking about FEMA waste.
Where you'll see the biggest outcry is from the Democrats who are, they don't want the waste and fraud to be turned off because it is a gigantic magnet to attract illegal immigrants and have them stay in the country. And I mean, you see some of the crazy stuff, like where money from FEMA, you know, which is meant, FEMA is an agency that's meant to take care of Americans in distress. And a bunch of their money was being sent to pay for luxury hotels in New York for illegal immigrants. And that was happening even after the president was elected, and even after he signed an executive order saying that needs to stop. So we actually made sure that that money did stop going, because obviously it's outrageous that American taxpayer money is spent on luxury hotels for illegals. But you have to say, like, why was that being done? It was because the Democrats are trying to import voters, basically.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah. And that's also why there's no voter ID needed. In fact, in California and New York State, you're not allowed to show voter ID. Doesn't that seem insane?
I mean, it is right. It is clearly the right thing to do.
I agree.
They need to clean this system up because it's been embedded for too long. There's too many people who run the civil service or places like FEMA in America have just been terribly profligate with our money.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think what Trump and Musk are doing on Ukraine is absolutely criminal. But on this, they're spot on. And just looking at the criminal rates, okay, especially when it comes to sexual offences and all that sort of thing, total convictions per 10,000. Albania, 4,000. Moldova, 1,600. Congo, 1,500. Namibia, 1,500. Somalia, Afghanistan, Morocco, Iraq, Algeria, Angola. All these people have massively higher offending rates than your average UK.
Right.
66 nationalities with a higher conviction rate than the British population. And 500,000 sexual offences recorded by the police, conviction rate of 3.1. Look, we're just endangering women in this country.
Yeah.
And I do think...
And why are we importing people to endanger women? Would be my question.
No, there is no excuse for it. Absolutely none. This is all from the Centre for Migration Control, a very, very interesting site and full of really useful facts.
Yeah, interesting this, because I'm looking at now the numbers here. The highest number of sex offence convictions accounted for by Romanians, Poles, Indians and Pakistanis, but the rates based on convictions per 10,000 of the population actually put Afghans with 77 convictions at the top, with a rate of 59 per 10,000, followed by 22.3 times that of Britons, followed by Eritreans, who accounted for 59 convictions at a rate of 53.6 per 10,000.
I mean, that is a very, very high, relatively high percentage.
Really huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the sort of grooming gang. There's, in one town, was it Telford or Rotherham? You had very, very large numbers of men and surprisingly large numbers of percentages just involved in the rape of people from sexual abuse of people from a different religion and different ethnic background.
And yet for so long we've been sort of coached, haven't we, by the lefties to say, you know, that's a racist thing to say, how dare you mention that, how dare you sort of, you know, put that out front, that's not the point. Most people who come here are law-abiding citizens. Well, it turns out, actually, no, they're not.
No, I mean, a very high percentage. And rather than think of individual rights of people who want to come here and then may or may not abuse the host population, I think we need to really look again at, you know, the rights of the majority. And we've got this obsessive, selfish individualism in this country. And, you know, we are an individualistic society, and for good reason, but we have got to balance that far more with the needs of the community and the needs of society.
And also this kind of do-gooder thing that some people do have in this country, where you've got organisations like Care for Calais, where they're going down to meet migrants coming in, handing them, you know, gifts, giving them blankets, giving them radios, giving them, you know, phones. It's like, you know, just stop.
No, it's just, it is not in the interest of this country. Secretary, and it would be nice if we had a Home Secretary who's still up to say that, whether it's Rob Jenrick or Rupert Lowe.
Yeah, absolutely right. Bob Seeley's here. It's coming up to 19 minutes past 6. Coming up, we're going to talk about a lot of things, including what is going on in Ukraine, including, of course, how many illegals have now come to this country this year alone, 4,000, which is a new record. We're going to talk about the Justice Secretary as well, who's been humiliated by her own judges, who have basically turned around to her over this business of advice to sentencing guidelines. Basically, they're saying, you know, stop interfering, get the hell out of our office, which is not really what we expect, is it? 0344 499 1000. Also, I've got some news for you on the bumper sticker front. I've got one here. We're going to be handing out a load more of them because we've had a load more come in. So if you've requested one, you will be getting one, I promise you. If you haven't requested one, we'll tell you how to do it. And even if you have already done it, you can always do it again. And then you get double the chance of actually getting something in the post in the next few days. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on.
text I wrote to Rupert basically forewarned him that the playbook that Zia Youssef uses and Nigel uses for setting people aside in the party that they don't like is one of calling them into question, discrediting them, and sacking them. And so when people then put up their defense for what the accusations have been, they're dismissed as being, you know, those are people who've already been discredited and dismissed, and they're rubbished in that process.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 23 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. Bob Seeley's here with me. I've got some very interesting messages coming in. Dave says this, I can't understand how the tanker collision happened, as modern tankers have several collision avoidance systems, including, yes, modern tankers like one, automatic identification system, AIS, which broadcasts a ship's position, speed and course to nearby vessels and shore stations. Number 2, radar and ARPA, automatic radar plotting aid, detects and tracks nearby ships, predicting potential collisions and suggesting course changes. 3, electronic chart display and information systems, ECDIS, which provides real-time navigation data and route planning. 4, Bridge Navigational Watch Alarm System, BNWAS, you obviously know your stuff, Dave, ensures the crew remains alert and responds to potential hazards. Number 5, vessel traffic services, shore-based monitoring and advisory services in busy shipping lanes. 6, coal regs, international regulations for preventing collisions at sea. And 7, integrated bridge systems, combines multiple navigation and control. Well, I mean, they've got all that, but clearly something went wrong. I mean, remember that ship that bashed into the bridge in Maryland and knocked it down?
Yes,
you know, I mean,
unbelievable.
Again, something that should never have happened. And you know, I wonder if all of these so-called, you know, fail-safe systems, if they're operated by an idiot, means that, you know, you end up having a bad thing.
Or the crew are half asleep.
Yeah. I mean, it did happen at night, didn't it? So
it is. I mean, Dave clearly
in the
knows
fog.
He knows what he's talking about, but you're right. I mean, look, the English Channel is one of the busiest. I know this wasn't an English Channel, but if you go a bit further down, the English Channel is one of the busiest waterways in the world, and you've got to have all this kit because of the amount of stuff that you're carrying, hundreds of millions of pounds worth of goods.
Absolutely right. We're going to be talking about it through the show. Chris Parry's going to join us. He said yesterday that the one good thing is that aviation fuel is a lot better than crude oil, so it will actually dissipate in the sea faster than you know, things. I mean, I can remember, you're probably too young to remember this, but the Torrey Canyon disaster in Cornwall, and I was actually in Cornwall when it happened, and remember walking through the beach with oil all over it, seagulls covered in oil. I mean, it was horrific. I mean, I was a kid. I was like 7 or 8 years old, and it was just awful. But luckily, I think that won't happen because the aviation fuel will kind of lighter, dissipate and be much lighter. Let's talk about some international stuff. Mark Carney, a man who some say ruined the Bank of England, ruined the British economy, suddenly popped up as the new Prime Minister of Canada. How'd that happen?
I mean, to be honest, I think because, if I understand correctly, Chrystia Freeland, who I remember from 25, 30 years ago when we were junior reporters together, he ran against Chrystia.
Right.
I think because she'd knifed Trudeau, she was never going to win. Okay. So she was like the Heseltine of Canadian politics, for those people who remember
Without
Maggie
the charm.
Yeah, well, exactly. No, Christia's all right. She's nice enough. But I mean, Carney, I can't. I mean, I don't know why I know that Canadians are massively overwoke, so they've obviously voted for somebody who's very woke.
Yes.
Interesting thing. As soon as all these people who are being impartial come out of the Bank of England, or come out of the civil service, or come out of the BBC, they immediately show their left-wing credentials. The good news is he has not. Well, if you look at the polls, he's heading for a massive defeat in a few months' time under this Canadian Conservative, who seems to have some of the determination of Trump without some of the more idiotic and unpleasant baggage of Trump as well.
Well, according to the Police and Telegraph today, he's banned from taking part in parliamentary debates or votes because he's not actually won a seat in an election. And so, but he yet ends up running the country, but he has never won an election.
No, it's pretty ridiculous. So, but he'll be. I can't see him beating a Pierre Poilievre, if I pronounce his name correctly. I think he's going to win a landslide Conservative victory, and he will be a useful model for Kemi and the Conservatives in this country, because he will show how you can cut back on the civil service, cut back on waste, get welfare under control, and actually start governing like Conservatives.
Yeah, interesting. A couple of BBC stories today. £5 million is the bill that we've all been presented with, apparently, by the BBC, for all the scandals that they've been dealing with, including, of course, the most recent one, which is involving Hugh Edwards. Apparently £1.3 million was spent on his investigation. Tim Westwood, £3.3 million. I mean, you know, when you look at this sort of money and these figures, you kind of ask yourself, well, how do they spend this money? What's it actually spent on?
The BBC has an appalling... And, you know, I used to... When I was a junior reporter, I was in some godforsaken part of Yugoslavia, the Soviet Union, about 30 years ago. Whenever I saw a BBC satellite dish, I'd be quite proud.
Yes.
I'd be happy, because it meant that the Times are more likely to get more work.
Well, do you know what? The World Service is probably still a decent operation.
More or less.
Right?
But you look at the Arabic Service, it's full of anti-Semites now. But the BBC used to be something I was really proud of, and now I almost like I don't want to keep slagging it off because I know it's an easy target. But I just despair of its sort of cultural bias, its sloppiness. The fact is that they've got a horrendous track record of either defending paedophiles and sexual criminals in their own organisation.
They seem to have an overly sort of active proportion of them, don't they?
There's not a few of them, which is sad. It's very sad to say. Or, I mean, even worse, by far the worst, is their absolute lack of, or their absolute reluctance to to investigate the grooming gangs.
Yeah.
If these were Muslim kids being raped and abused by gangs of white men, you would never hear the end of it on the BBC. But because it doesn't fit into racism, according to the left-wing opinion on what racism is, it's only something that white people do. I think their silence, just for me, I'm no longer interested in supporting the BBC, and it just genuinely makes me sad to say that. But I think they've absolutely lost the plot.
They have literally shot their bolt. It's quite incredible.
It's awful.
And the idea, we saw Tim Davey last week and Samir Shah, who's the new sort of head of programming and all of that, saying, you know, we're obviously looking into lessons that we can learn from, you know, this Gaza documentary that they made. 400,000 quid has gone. Clearly, some of it has gone to Hamas. You know, unbelievably.
But they never. Mike, the thing is, they never learn. Every 5 years, or even sometimes more often, there's a massive scandal, and they'll do an investigation. Why did they underreport Brexit? Why were they too nice about the European Union? Why do they cover up for Jimmy Savile and all these other paedophiles? Why did they give money to Hamas? Why did they report the Hamas-Israeli conflict so badly? And at the end of every report is, you know, the BBC failed, but it's okay because everyone loves the BBC.
And nobody gets fired.
We don't have to change. And all the people who are involved, they've all been promoted or they've left, so we shouldn't go and sort of say nasty things about them.
I mean, I was speaking to somebody
every time.
I was speaking to somebody the other day who said that inside the BBC, and this is somebody who worked there for many, many years, you know, they've got this kind of level of management, middle management, who basically think they're there for life. They say, look, you know, sometimes, you know, the boss comes and goes, you know, director generals come and go, the scandal sometimes topples the top bods, but the middle management never move.
This is one of the... OK, you know, the Conservatives got hammered at the last election. We are trying to rebuild because we know we have to change. OK? But there are institutions in this country that simply have no failure point. The Church of England, sad to say, and the BBC are two of them. However badly they do, because they've had a monopoly, or monopoly in the past at any rate, they somehow think they don't have they adapt. And it's killing,
and they feel you get the feeling they don't feel like they have to answer to anybody.
No, they don't.
You know,
I mean, they will nominally answer to it, people, and then they will go on because they've been absolutely captured by sort of not only people that are woke and lefty and all these other cliche terms, but actually fundamentally are really not very competent, do not have strong leadership. One of the most depressing things for me to see is the amount of second-rate leadership in our institutions in this country, where provided you peddle a woke message, basically you're not really challenged on your competence, your fitness to lead, your ability to lead, your vision, your leadership skills. None of that seems to count, you know, and it's just this sort of Jobsworth culture in quangos and institutions.
And it filters down into everyday life.
It does.
We're all sort of subjected to it in one way, shape or form. I mean, I had a conversation, I'll probably expand upon it later on in the show, with my energy supplier, because they're going to revamp all the meters apparently in June, and I've been getting these kind of threatening letters from them saying we need to come and give you a new meter. And so eventually I thought, all right, well, why don't you just explain to me exactly what's going on? And I got this guy who was probably, you know, in his 20s, didn't really know what he was talking about. And he said, well, we'll need to come to your house and we need to come and, you know, have something. I said, well, OK, well, how does that work? We'll need to have a 4-hour window. I'm like, I don't have a 4-hour window. Sorry, I work for a living. I'm not going to sit here for 4 hours waiting for one of your bozos to show up. Can you not give me like a 2-hour window? No, can't do that. 4 bloody hours. They want me to sit there and wait for them to come and change the meter. So I said, well, I'm not doing it. I immediately switched suppliers, and no doubt I'll probably have to go through the same thing with them. But it felt good that I was able to just say to them, look, get stuffed. I'm not doing what you want.
Yep. I'm to be honest, I'm beginning to get the same emails. I think all these meters are pretty much...
It's a racket, isn't it? It's bound to be.
Well, OK, if I remember it, I think the government has basically mandated it. So, and we're all paying in higher energy.
Yeah, all you know is they're going to give you a new meter and they're going to charge you twice as much.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, thanks very much indeed for absolutely doing me up the... Sorry, I can't even say it on this time of the morning. But, I mean, that's how you feel. It just feels like there's somebody coming for you every single 5 minutes. Coming up, we're going to speak about the Speaker, who apparently still in the shtuck for taking his wife halfway around the world for about 3 million quid because he thinks he deserves it. And, of course, Mike Amesbury, who's decided to step down, finally, after beating one of his constituents to a pulp because he didn't like him. 6:34, Bob Seeley's here. We'll be back after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory at 6:36. The hours are creeping past us. I mean, we're here all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 hours, glorious hours for Morning Glory every single weekday morning from 6 until 10. Bob See's with him this morning. Bob, let me just play you a bit of Mike Amesbury, yes. The MP for Runcorn. I think it is actually probably not the MP for Runcorn, but I'll come back to that. He's talking about stepping down after his court case.
I'm going to step aside at the earliest opportunity. I've got processes I must go through. Staff, for example, there's a statutory process in terms of redundancies, so it's not only me out of a job, so to speak, although it was more than a job. It was a calling for me. I've loved most of my time being a Member of Parliament, but it also affects, I've got 6 members of staff, so I've got a period of notice I've got to give them, so it's going to be as quickly as possible, really.
Yes, well, I mean, maybe if you had a sense of responsibility for those 6 people that you employ, you wouldn't have gone around punching the hell out of somebody who was a constituent when you were out late one night. I'm sorry, I have no sympathy for Mike Amesbury. I know it's a hard job. I know it's probably stressful. But, you know, if he's now going to start asking for sort of sympathy by going, oh, 6 people are going to lose their jobs as a result of this. I mean, you've worked in the House of Commons, and I appreciate that, you know, you're responsible. But if you're responsible and you're supposed to behave in a certain way, you don't do what he did.
No, you don't. I mean, look, I'm going to put a tiny... there was no excuse for him. He was drunk, and he basically picked an argument, and he threw the first punch. So he's completely out of order.
Rights,
and from that point of view, I'm not going to say, well, poor Mike Amesbury. Personally, I never found him unpleasant.
Right.
There are Labour people who are just not very nice, and to be honest, I never found that he was one of them. And you put up with a lot of abuse and hatred. I mean, even now I'm getting sort of, you get garbage on social media.
Of course you do.
Just straight up lies about you.
I mean, it's awful. Social media is an absolute sewer. There's no question about that.
And you get people who just go out of their way to bully and harass you effectively.
Right.
So from that point of view, I have a smidgen of sympathy. And, you know, if somebody had attacked him and he was punching somebody else, that is you know, defending himself, should we say, I'll watch my words, that's different. But to go out of your way and, you know, go out of your way to attack somebody, I think is...
And to then further attack him when he's on the ground, by the way.
This is not defensible. I'm not defending that. He was a fool to do what he did, but actually... I think actually genuinely he probably liked his job and cared about it, and it was an idiot thing to do.
I'm sure he did, and I'm sure it's one of those things that when stuff like this happens in your life, he'll probably regret it for the rest of his life.
I bet he will.
But what about the by-election? I mean, until this week, or until last week maybe, you would probably have said Reform have got a pretty good chance of winning it. I wonder now whether they've blown the gaff on that.
I think do I think they've got a good chance in Runcorn? I do. I still think they're front runners to do well. Have they blown the gaff long term? Yes, I think they have. Look, the one message that we got was that if you added the Conservative vote and the Reform vote together, and I know if some of Reform vote wouldn't vote Conservative at the last election, you would not have got a Labour supermajority. And I think come the next election, whatever constituency you are, if you are a small c Conservative who hates this Labour government, hate what they're doing to this country, and you are a patriot, we have got to come up with a better system than the way that the Reform have divided the Conservative vote in this country. Because if we keep voting Reform, unless they're going to win, which I don't think they will now, and I think they absolutely have blown it, because Rupert Lowe will go off as an independent, do his own thing.
Or might become a Tory.
Or might become a Tory, or might set up his own party, who knows. I think they've blown it long term, and basically, provided we have a reformed Conservative Party under Kemi and we get our act together on immigration, on crime, on other stuff, I'm sorry, we have got to get rid of this Labour government. We have got to get rid of them.
Well, they're doing their best to try and rid themselves of us. A story broke last night about a senior aide to Wes Streeting, and I'm sorry about this time early in the morning, pleaded guilty. Sam Gould is his name, suspended from the Labour Party, faces calls to resign as a Redbridge councillor, pleads guilty to indecent exposure. I mean, you know, what's going on with these people?
There's no shortage of them.
I mean...
It's like the ex-Labour MP got done in a paedophile sting in Brighton.
Right. It's just ridiculous. Nigel Farage was on ITV last night. Let's have a look at what he had to say about Rupert Lowe.
Look, there is a behavioural problem here. There has been a behavioural problem for some months. Outbursts, anger, that kind of thing. Frankly, I've tried to put it all to the back of my mind. We've all tried to put it to the back of our minds. And as I say, I'm not prejudging anything on these allegations of a bullying culture going on in his offices. But I put it to you, any party who had a senior figure that was facing those accusations would have to act in some way. Mr. Lowe has made a whole series of comments about the KC's investigation, all of which have proved to be wrong. He's then out today saying there is no accusation against him at all, when actually there is. So I'm afraid we're not quite getting the full facts of this. Look, you know what? I could do without this. It's a huge distraction for the party, for me, for everybody.
See, I don't think he gets it. He thinks it's a huge distraction. No, it's going to kill the party if he's not careful.
It is, and actually, I'm sorry, I don't.
And maybe it already has.
I don't buy a lot of what Nigel Farage is saying there about this sort of, Lowe's all these things that are untrue. I have to say, reading Lowe's social media posts, he is absolutely cut and dried. And when you are trying to get people's, I don't know what happened, neither do you.
Right.
But if you look at people's reactions and the willingness of what Farage was saying, with the line by line factual denials or confirmations of whatever point by Lowe's stuff on social media is very convincing, because it says this is the allegation, this is the reality, this is the allegation, this is the reality. Right. If you're trying to convince people and get them on side, Lowe is doing a much better job.
And I watched him last night. He did an interview, as I say, with Dan Wootton on his show, which is off to the side of the sort of mainstream media. Very successful show, however.
Very successful.
And he came across very well. Came across as a very rational individual. Did not come across as somebody suffering from dementia. Did not come across as somebody. I mean, I've often joked about the fact that Rupert Lowe, his only crime really is that he never shuts up. He talks quite a long, he gives very long answers to questions, and it's quite hard to interrupt him. And he may well be a slightly rambunctious individual, but he certainly did not come across as kind of unhinged, which is what Nigel Farage is trying to make him out to be.
And to be honest, if you look at the policy announcement that the Reform have come out with, they're not credible. So if you look at the net zero stuff, and we have got to redo net zero,
absolutely.
But just saying we want more taxpayer money for this and more, it's not coherent. And the point that Rupert Lowe is making for anyone engaged in any level of sensible politics is an incredibly serious point, sensible point. You've got to get a credible manifesto, and you can't just continue to be a glorified one-man band and say, oh, vote Nigel, we don't really know what he believes in, but we'll vote for him anyway. You can't do that if you want to be credible. And I think Lowe was a much greater threat to the Conservatives.
Yes, interesting. This is from Andrew Bridgen yesterday, former Conservative MP, of course. He posted this. The plot thickens, he says. One of my former parliamentary aides went on to work for Rupert Lowe. She is one of the staff involved in these allegations against him. She has told me that her original complaint had nothing to do with Rupert personally and was related to the actions of another member of his staff. I have her permission to post this tweet. Again, he's got no skin in the game. He doesn't have any reason to have a go at Nigel Farage, and yet he's giving his view.
Absolutely, and we're not talking about sort of Bridgen's politics aside. Again, factual statement. Lowe was not accused himself.
Right.
So effectively, we're now into the politics of you're having to police your office for what people say privately to each other. This is ridiculous. It's like that idiocy in the pub where a landlord has now got to check that somebody doesn't say something too freaky to a barmaid.
And it's very unreform-like. People are saying to me, and we've got plenty of messages coming in today as well. This is not what they were supposed to be doing.
No.
What on earth are they doing, wasting all this time? And Lee Anderson sort of operating as like the sheriff of all of it. And kind of going, what?
They're hiding behind these sort of slightly sort of very sort of HR.
A bit sort of woke, aren't they?
Yeah,
they've gone woke. Reform's gone woke.
Well,
have they? Is that possible? I think that's the problem, isn't it? We'll take your views on that. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a voice note from Steve on my.
Good morning, Steve from Barnsley. I've come to the conclusion that we are officially Oz, not Australia, and Europe is the yellow brick road. And the immigrants just love the yellow brick road. We're off to see Customer, a wonderful, wonderful man. I think our lighthouses must be like the Batman lights, apart from the shine pound signs. He's like a Robin Hood. He takes from us rich and gives to the immigrants. What a plonker.
There's a lot going on there. It's very creative there, Steve. Well done. But he's not wrong, is he?
No, he's not wrong.
It is literally like a bat signal going out to all countries from Eritrea to Tunisia to Afghanistan to Iraq. Get on the dinghy, come to Britain, we'll look after you.
Yeah. No, it is not good.
It's not good.
But it's a very good post.
It is. Coming up, we're going to talk about Sir Lindsay Hoyle, Mr. Speaker, because he's still in the papers. A big page lead on him on page 9, which you'll be now hating. Because, we discovered this, we revealed it to you last week, £250,000 worth of public money, taxpayers' money he spent on swanning around the world, taking his wife to all sorts of nice places like a spa hotel in the Cayman Islands, to Gibraltar several times. There's word now that he's having to correct the record, which he will hate doing. It's me and Bob Seeley coming back after this.
They've advertised for a head of diversity on their careers.
Of course they have.
I mean, this is a position which takes home £125,000 a year, assumes responsibility to execute a comprehensive plan to implement and deliver the BBC's workforce DEI. Website notes that the future head of diversity will be responsible for the development. It's basically a load of crap. Yes. And there's about 8 lines saying what it's going to do. And you look at that and you go, right, so let me get this absolutely right. In a world where we all, in whatever broadcasting we do, have to justify to the people that...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 7. I'm Mike Graham with you, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be joining us. Bob Seeley's here with us as well. We must talk about the Speaker of the House of Commons because you, as a former member of the Chamber, I presume you're sort of embedded with this view that the Speaker can do no wrong. He must be treated with respect at all times. You know, this guy, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, is turning out to be, I think, worse than Bercow was.
He's not worse than Bercow, but he does seem to like fat, swanky hotels.
Yeah.
There is a bit of an issue there, I granted.
I mean, he's been taking quite a lot of trips abroad.
He has been.
250,000 quid's worth. And as I said last week when we first did this story, you know, I went to Singapore once and it didn't cost 23,000 quid.
No, look,
sorry.
with all this stuff, you cannot. If you develop a sense of entitlement, it absolutely comes back to haunt you.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't, because you're a public servant and you're there. You know, you should remember your place, and I mean that in a sort of a positive way.
Yeah.
That you're there to represent people, not to spend vast sums of money on swanky hotels and the likes. It's not great. And the problem is, if people read that and they basically think everyone's got their snouts in the trough, it's not good.
That's what it looks like. And I mean, apparently the story in the Mail today, page 9, which is a big page lead, so it's not going away. He basically now was under mounting pressure over his lavish travel expenses after admitting to errors in the official Parliament log of how the money was spent. Critics of the Commons Speaker demanded a probe to determine how many other entries may be wrong after he promised to correct the record over a jaunt to Gibraltar. So, I mean, again, I see the trouble with this, it's a bit like, for me, Gary Neville, when he was a great Sky pundit talking about football, seemed to know what he was talking about, no problem at all. Suddenly took a managerial job in Valencia and completely screwed it up. And I think the team got relegated out of the Spanish league. And suddenly he then was no longer the same kind of, he didn't have the same credibility as a pundit. This speaker has now no longer the credibility, I don't think, to command the Commons, because of the way that he's behaved.
I think he will carry on commanding the Commons, but I do think it's going to be embarrassing for him if he's got to turn up and correct the record, etc., etc. And look, Lindsay's not a bad guy. I wish, and actually he was a breath of fresh air after Burko, because Burko was such an egotist and actually was horribly bending the rules for Remainers.
But you see, I got to know Burko a little bit, because I ended up doing some live shows with him and Alex Salmon up in Scotland on the Edinburgh Festival, and actually I found him to be much nicer as a man than I'd ever thought he would be. You know, he didn't come across...
He can turn on the charm. That doesn't necessarily mean he's the nicest.
OK, I'll take your word for it, because you know him better than I do. But, I didn't think he was that bad. But Hoyle, I think, is incredibly pompous. And I know the job sort of commands that you be pompous, but I think this is going to finish his reputation off, isn't it?
It won't be good. Look, it won't be good for him. And as I say, you can't be seen to be taking the... You shouldn't be seen to be taking the mickey out of the system, because people lose respect for you and the system, and you're there to uphold institutions as being part of them, and you should do your best for yourself, but also for the institutions that you represent.
Absolutely,
I know it's quite an old school opinion, but
I think that's right.
And when people take the mickey out of it, it damages us all. I wish they wouldn't do it.
No, indeed. One story that we both noticed in the papers today, and we should caveat it by the fact that it's an ongoing trial, which is expected to last up to 14 weeks. But it's the battle of the plastic surgeons, which I'm finding strangely reassuringly British. These two characters who have apparently been involved in all sorts of feuds. There's a victim, there's an accused, there's a crime scene. It's like something out of Midsummer Murders, isn't it?
Well, I was going to say Agatha Christie via Midsummer Murders, and there's a great plot line, because it says Jonathan Brooks, at 61, a consultant surgeon specialising in burdens of plastics, wanted Graham Perks out of the way as he was a witness in an ongoing disciplinary proceedings against him. That is a good... I mean, that's a fiction plot line, isn't it?
It is.
You kill your rival because he's threatening to expose you.
Yes. It's absolutely...
If it's
John Nettles kind of emerges from the sidelines going exactly what is going on here. The court was played a 999 call in which Henry Perks told an operator he's been stabbed in the chest, he's breathing, he's been stabbed. We need the police as well. There's been an intruder in the house. Apparently, one of them is accused of breaking into a fellow surgeon's home, dousing it in petrol and trying to stab him to death. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Did he do his own first aid?
Well... I mean, I suppose the plastic surgery is a difficult game, isn't it? But it is absolutely incredible. Lots and lots of... I mean, the trial will continue. We'll keep you updated on all of that. Let's get a quick voice note from Nick on the BBC.
Morning, Mike. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. I'm enjoying your discussion with Bob Seeley, and he's one of the Tory MPs I quite liked. Your recent chat about the failure of the institutions, the BBC head honchos just failing constantly. Part of this is because our institutions are run by people that are actually rewarded for failure. If they get sacked, they get huge payoffs. Whereas you or I or the man in a factory, if he does something wrong, he gets sacked and he's turfed out on his ear.
Yeah, I think that's right. There is a culture of sort of nobody really taking the blame for anything, isn't there?
I think Nick is absolutely spot on. In all these institutions, it is really, really difficult to get turfed out for being incompetent or for having poor leadership. No, and then he's right. You then get these ridiculous payoffs because effectively you're part of establishment, so you need to be taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of breaking news for you, and we haven't really spoken about Ukraine today yet, but one dead in Moscow, around Moscow's region, after a big Ukraine drone attack against Russia on the day peace talks begin in Saudi. I think Volodymyr Zelensky's in Saudi. Talking to the Crown Prince, but not to the Russians. No. The Americans are there as well. How do you see it all kind of playing out?
To be honest, I'm not going to pretend I know what's going to happen. I think there's a few directions it could go in. The problem is, if the Ukrainians give the Americans what the Americans want, or Trump wants to give to the Russians, it will divide Ukraine, and Ukraine will begin to unravel. If Zelensky hands over more land that the Russians haven't conquered, the Ukrainian army is going to go ballistic about this.
If they, because we're talking about lands they haven't lost.
And also it's very strategically dangerous, because if the Russians get hold of Kherson, a county in the south of the country that they haven't conquered all of it, if they get it on the other side of the Dnieper River, I guarantee you within 3 to 5 years they will then attack Odessa, and they want to drive their army, the Russian army, through the south of Ukraine all the way into Moldova up to the Romanian border again. So what Putin wants is that he's relying on Trump and his relationship with Trump, whether that's healthy or not, to deliver a victory that the Russians could not win on the battlefield. And if Zelensky hands them that, Ukraine begins to unravel. And what what Putin also wants, is the internal destruction of Ukraine, because then it becomes easier to say Ukraine's a failed state, and a second invasion, or a third invasion now, would then succeed in destroying that state. So again, Putin is thinking long term. He's got a very aggressive negotiating tactic. The Kremlin School of Negotiations is a well-known school of negotiations, and unfortunately Trump is being played by them for whatever reason.
But it looks as though the Ukrainians as a people are willing now to give up some land, which even a few months ago they weren't willing to do. And I take your point that you don't give them land that the Russians don't have currently in their possession. But if you give them what they have in their possession, it seems to me that some Ukrainians, or more than some Ukrainians, will take that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's ever been in doubt. They're accepting temporary ownership. Okay, giving up in perpetuity land that the Russians have seized, that's difficult. But actually accepting the reality on the ground, I haven't seen a Ukrainian who's been willing to argue with that. So I'm not sure that point's new. I think the problem is that the Russians are wanting that in perpetuity, that sort of Novorossiya, whatever they're going to call it, and they want a lot else that they haven't conquered. So effectively they're setting themselves up to seize all of the Black Sea coast, the north side of the Black Sea coast, pretty much all of it, and if they can't get it now, they'll get it in the next war in 3 or 4 years' time. And I just think the Americans, for whatever reason, are being played by the Russians, and I think it's terrible for democracies, it's terrible for Europe, and it's terrible for NATO.
Yeah, but so is the war, I suppose you would say.
Oh, look, for sure. That. But I mean, again, you know, look, we're at war with Nazi Germany. We could have say, oh, we'll give up, we'll stop fighting, and everyone will live happily ever after. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ukraine was invaded by a Russian dictator, and that dictator, nothing is being asked of that dictator. And actually the war stops when the Russians stop invading, not when the Ukrainians stop fighting.
Right. Bob Seeley, thank you very much indeed. Very good hour. We went through lots of stories in the papers, some that we haven't got to, which we'll get to over the course of the next 3 hours. Bob Seeley will be back again very soon, I hope. It's coming up to 7 o'clock. If you want to get in touch, you know how to do it. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We've got some great messages. We're going to tell you how to get your hands on some bumper stickers as well. This, of course, is Morning Glory. We'll be back after the news.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours every single weekday morning from 6 a.m. To 10 a.m. Bob Seeley was in talking us through some of the papers. Some of the things we haven't got to yet, which I haven't mentioned yet, is, of course, one story about Shabana Mahmood, who's Labour's Justice Secretary, who has been humiliated by her own Quango. This happened late last night. This, of course, is the Sentencing Commission, the people who say that, you know, if you're black, if you're brown, if you're trans, if you're a woman, you'll be treated very differently when it comes to sentencing you for a crime than if you're white, British, and of course a Christian. Absolutely unbelievable stuff, right? Official guidelines published last week recommended that ethnic minorities and transgender people convicted of a crime should be treated differently by judges and magistrates. Shabana Mahmood came out immediately and said, this is not what I believe, this is not what the Labour government believes, and I will be recommending to these judges, basically, or as we like to call them, lefty activists, that they shouldn't be doing this. But of course, they've come back and said, basically, bugger off. We're not going to do what you want either. So it looks as though that particular guideline is going to stay with us, which is extraordinary stuff. We're going to talk about that coming up in this hour with Will Kingston, political commentator, of course. Breaking news, and we got one dead person in Moscow, around the region of Moscow, thanks to a big drone attack coming from Ukraine. We spoke to Bob Seeley there just about the war going on. He believes that the peace talks today, which are going on in Saudi, if they end up becoming very pro-Russian and the Russians get more perhaps than they bargained for, then that could be very bad news for the future of Europe. But we've been talking about that for a very long time, of course, and we will come back to it over the course of the next 3 hours. 4,000 dinghy illegals have arrived in this country since the beginning of the year. That is a new record, ladies and gentlemen. They arrested a guy, as Bob Seeley said, just because he was on the front page of the Mail on Sunday. He's a Palestinian terrorist, basically, wants to kill all Jews. He was allowed into the country on Thursday, arrested on Sunday night, and who knows what's going to happen to him. Will he be sent home? Certainly hope so, but there's a pretty good chance that he won't be. Phones stolen every 7 minutes in London. That's another story we'll be doing. And of course, the fallout from reform and what is going on. Last night, Nigel Farage gave an interview to ITV. Also, Rupert Lowe gave an interview to Dan Wootton. Here's what you're saying about it.
As a reform voter, for me, this, to be honest, is the nail in the coffin.
I'll never vote for them again because I don't believe Rupert Lowe is exact as what they say he is. He just doesn't come across that kind of man.
Thorne, Farage and Lowe, I mean, I suppose the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Meanwhile, the markets are going a bit mad this morning. Donald Trump and his tariff activity is upsetting quite a few people. The Dow Jones and the S&P 500 are having their worst day since December, and the Nasdaq, which is a smaller market force down there, has having its worst day in over 2 years. This is Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. We'll be telling you as well about how the Princess of Wales and Angela Rayner turned up at an event wearing the same clothes. Blimey, that's a bit of a worry, isn't it? Let's talk to Will Kingston, political commentator, about the lie of the land. Will, a very good morning to you.
G'day, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all. Let us, I suppose, kick off with the big story of the week, which appears to be reform and what on earth is going on behind the scenes there, because a lot of people who listen to this show, who watch this show, who are talk aficionados, are reform voters, and an awful lot of people are very concerned about where this is all going.
Yeah, I heard the last comment from one of your listeners saying the truth lies somewhere in the middle, and I fundamentally disagree. I think this is entirely Nigel Farage's ego. I think that a good man in Rupert Lowe has been completely stitched up by an insecure party. He was the person doing most of the work for them. He was their clearest communicator. If you actually look at the substance of the allegations, they're a nonsense. And I feel personally just incredibly deflated and dispirited by the whole series of events, as I know most reform supporters do, because there is still a pressing need for what reform is offering in this country, a desperate, desperate need. And it just feels like they are committing suicide, all because of outsized egos in the political sphere, and the country cannot afford it. I can say personally, I know Rupert Lowe. He's always been a gentleman with me. I think these allegations are an absolute nonsense, and I just find them incredibly depressing.
But isn't it obvious to everybody out there that this is damaging the party? And this is the bit that I don't get, because, Reform, we're not supposed to be the party of the woke. I mean, I sort of made a slightly tongue-in-cheek remark in the last hour to Bob Seeley. It's almost as though they've gone woke. They've sort of, decided that they're now going to start bringing in HR experts. They're going to call the police. I mean, in what world does a 67-year-old man say something to a 38-year-old man in Zia Yusuf in which he feels so endangered that he has to call the police in? I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, of course it doesn't make sense. It's a crock. And just like the left uses woke mechanisms to try and get what they want, I think here that you've got Reform using woke mechanisms.
Yeah, but they're
to try
not
and
meant
get
to be
what they
doing
want.
this, though, are they?
No, but of course they're not. But again, it's a convenient excuse for them. And I'm going to say more directly, it's a convenient excuse for Nigel Farage.
Right.
We know that Nigel Farage has killed more right-wing political careers than the left has. And this is just the fact that he's feeling insecure, that someone who has built up a very strong following on X and in the broader community, someone who has the support of Elon Musk, we know that, is getting more of the spotlight. It is as simple as that. We've got a list that you could go through. We could spend the whole show, Mike, talking about the amount of people who Farage has effectively assassinated throughout the course of his career. And this is just another one to add to the list.
Yeah, absolutely right. He was speaking, and we're going to talk to Ben Habib later on in this hour as well, who's one of those people that you mentioned, who's sort of fallen foul of the ego of Nigel Farage. But let's have a look at what Nigel said last night to ITV.
Look, there is a behavioural problem here. There has been a behavioural problem for some months. Outbursts, anger, that kind of thing. Frankly, I've tried to put it all to the back of my mind. We've all tried to put it to the back of our minds. And as I say, I'm not prejudging anything on these allegations of a bullying culture going on in his offices. But I put it to you, any party who had a senior figure that was facing those accusations would have to act in some way. Mr. Lowe has made a whole series of comments about the KC's investigation, all of which have proved to be wrong. He's then out today saying there is no accusation against him at all, when actually there is. So I'm afraid we're not quite getting the full facts of this. Look, you know what? I could do without this. It's a huge distraction for the party, for me, for everybody.
it's more than a huge distraction. I think it may kill the party off, Will. But have a listen to this voice note we've got from Mark.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. Just seen that interview with Farage that you've played, and I've seen it for the first time. And my first instinct is he's lying through his teeth there. He looks like he's lying. His face looks like he's lying. In fact, he looks ashamed to me. He looks ashamed to be trying to defend the indefensible. He looks like he's been caught by the coppers robbing a granny, and he's in the interview room. Sorry, mate, you caught me red-handed. That's what his face looks like. And to be using the members' 25 quids to pay a KC maybe £1,000 an hour or something to stitch up one of their own members, basically the best MP in the Commons, is it's just the end for me. That's it. Reform are over. And if Robert Jenrick leads the Tories, then I'll probably go back to the Tories. I won't vote for Kemi, but I would vote for Robert Jenrick.
Interesting. And Mark speaks for an awful lot of people, Will, because I'm getting that view from an awful lot of the interactions we've been having since the beginning of this week. And I mean, is it the end for reform? I mean, it looks as though, I watched, I don't know if you saw it, Dan Wootton's interview with Mr. Lowe, and at the end of the day, he came across very well. You know, Rupert is not a man that takes any nonsense. He clearly is quite outspoken. He said, you know, he's admitted to the fact that he is obviously somebody who doesn't like to be told what to do, doesn't like to be pushed around, doesn't like to be in any way kind of sidelined. You know, he does what he does. He's not going to give up. But I mean, he's more or less said that he's never going to be a Reform MP again.
Yeah, these claims around behavioural problems from Farage are actually shameful. You've had journalists for a long period of time now who have asked other Reform politicians before these allegations about Lowe as a team member, and they've all said that he's a teddy bear personality, he's collegial, he's hardworking. They all say nothing but good things about him. So I think that is a nonsense. In terms of whether Reform are done, and this is something I really struggle with, we've got to remember 4 years to go till the next election. It's a huge amount of time in politics. Trump turned around the grab them by the so-and-so comment in the space of a month. So you can turn around problems pretty quickly in politics if you want to. And there is still the need in this country for the type of politics that Reform is offering. At the same time, this has undermined trust with a huge amount of the people that care most about this movement. So I hate to give you this answer, Mike. I don't know is the short answer. I really don't know, but it certainly does not help.
But it would be extraordinary, would it not, if, given the success that the party has had, the incredible popularity that they've garnered in the space of just a few short months, to be leading in the polls quite considerably often, to be, you know, out there making much more trouble for the government than the official opposition, the Tory party, and to have made such an impact in such a huge way for so few people to have done it, for them to have thrown all that away and to have killed it off and literally stamped on it and chucked it down a well, I find it amazing.
Well, two things on that. The first is so much of the impact that has been made via the hard work of Rupert Lowe.
Yeah.
So I think so you can put forward written questions towards the government in the House, and I think Lowe has put forward something like 950 odd written questions to the government. Tice has put forward 120, and I think Farage has put forward 20.
Well, I think I saw a stat yesterday, Will, that since Rupert Lowe's absence, shall we say, from the Reform whip, 48% reduction in activity from the Reform Party. So he was basically 50% of what they were doing.
He's doing the hard work of holding the government to account. And that's also, by the way, the hard work on behalf of Reform and the Conservative Party, who aren't really doing it.
Yeah.
But the other thing I would say on this, as to whether or not this is terminal, is that you would need to see a change in behaviour from Farage if he's actually going to be the leader of a proper political party. Like I heard in that ITV interview, I don't think we saw this particular clip, but he said something like, I don't fall out with people, they fall out with me. He sounded like a 14-year-old. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this is obviously a pattern of behaviour that's gone throughout his political career. And if this continues, you're going to have exactly what Rupert Lowe said, and that is this messianic figure at the head of the party who doesn't broach any sort of criticism. And as a result of that, you cannot have a functioning political party with a godlike figure who refuses to accept any sort of criticism on his part. It just won't work.
Right. And let's talk about a story that would normally be being discussed by Reform if they weren't so busy arguing with each other and pointing fingers and accusing each other of all sorts of stuff which involves the police and various other things. Foreigners convicted of nearly a quarter of sex crimes in this country, data which has been found out by the Ministry of Justice, apparently obtained under Freedom of Information laws, says the full extent of convictions must be acted upon. 15% of sexual offences, including rape, accounted for by foreign nationals between 2021 and 2023. A further 8% of convictions recorded as unknown nationals. Basically, census data showing that foreign nationals make up just 9.3% of the population, but they're committing by far and away a huge number of crimes. 23% of sexual crimes, 17% of drug crimes, 13% of theft, 12% of violence. I mean, this is outrageous, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it should be. As a clarification, I think the Ministry of Justice were doing everything possible not to release this sort of data. We haven't heard this sort of stuff over recent years. It was the Centre for Migration Control who, through Freedom of Information laws, managed to get this information, and it is so important we're finally seeing this stuff, because it just destroys this all cultures are equal BS that has underpinned the immigration narrative from both the Conservatives and from the Labor Party in this country. And the second thing I would say, in addition to the whole all cultures are equal nonsense, is that this isn't in and of itself a problem with immigration. I'm an immigrant. You didn't see Australia in that list. You didn't see New Zealand in that list. You didn't see Italy or Greece or other Western countries, other Western countries. It shows that there are particular countries and cultures that are arriving in this country that represent disproportionate levels of problems, particularly around how they view women and how they view other things in society. And unfortunately, because we have this view that, we need to treat everyone equally when it comes to our immigration system, we don't differentiate between those cultures. And it's not only silly, it is morally scandalous to actually put the people of the United Kingdom at risk as a result of that warped ideology. Yeah, totally. I mean, looking at the numbers here, sexual offences committed by nationality, Afghanistan comes top, 59, Eritrea 54, Namibia 50, Chad 40, Moldova 38. And when it comes to violence, Congo tops that list, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Gambia, and theft. Amazingly, Algeria seems to be topping that list. Morocco, Romania, Congo and Chad. I mean, when are we going to get to the end of this conversation where the lefties go, oh, actually, maybe you're right. Maybe inviting all these people into the country actually wasn't a great idea to begin with. But there's no sign of it stopping. I mean, we've got this guy roaming around who was finally arrested last night, Abu Wadi, who is a Palestinian terrorist, effectively, who came into this country last Thursday, filmed himself coming in, was only arrested, really, as Bob Seeley said, because he was on the front page of the Daily Mail, and the Border Force thought, bloody hell, we better get this guy under wraps. But, the chances of him being deported are probably slim to none, aren't they? Yeah, they are. And I hate to come back to Rupert Lowe, but Rupert Lowe has been someone who's been pushing very strongly that these types of people need to be deported the moment that they hit the shores of the United Kingdom. And that's obviously the case. I think the really important thing that is critical is getting the facts out there in a really clear, considered way, which we haven't been able to do. So things like the data from the Centre for Migration Control, things like that, 90% of the people that are coming in these boats are fighting-age men. They're not refugees in the way that most people would think of refugees. They're economic migrants, and this type of person is the classic example. Like, do you think that most of the people in war-torn areas are, 30-year-old blokes? Of course they're not. It's just they're the ones who are capable of being able to cross parts of Europe and then get onto a boat. You're not having kind of the women and the children who are in refugee camps who are genuinely struggling reaching this country. And I think that's another thing that needs to be pointed out here, is how genuinely unfair it is and how unkind it is to have these sorts of open boat policies. Because for all of these people that we let in and then we put in hotels, there are women and children languishing in refugee camps who are doing things via the proper channels, who are not being enabled to get into this country. The right needs to take control of the narrative and say they are the ones who are the kind and compassionate side of this debate, and it is the left who are uncaring and who are allowing ultimately more people to die at sea as a result of their policies.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Will, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Will Kingston, political commentator. Kenny from Edinburgh says, morning, Mike. I'd like to tell Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe to stop behaving like wee lassies in the huff and sort themselves out. It's OK for them if Labour end up getting a second term. They're well off, so they won't have to worry about the roof over their head or food on the table. But I do, and I and regular working class people like me need a united Reform Party. Please, Rupert, please, Nigel, me and my family need you both. Sort this out. Kenny from Edinburgh, I think, speaks for an awful lot of people who can't quite believe what is going on. Let's get a voice note from Jerry on Lindsay Hoyle.
Morning, Mike. Jerry from Ayrshire. Regarding this character, Lindsay Hoyle, and his jaunts all around the world at the public's expense, see if MD in another line of work was to behave like that, spend money and then mark it down as something else, they'd get to jail for fraud. It's an absolute disgrace because they're MPs, they get away with absolute murder. I'm absolutely sick of it, I really am. I wish we could just have a president and have somebody like Trump in place sorting all this crap out. Anyway, brilliant show as per.
Jerry, good to hear from you. Thanks very much indeed. You speak the truth. Lindsay Hoyle, what an absolute and utter disgrace that man is. You know, he seems to think it's fine to spend £250,000 of our money. He seems to think it's great to spend £23,000 going to Singapore, or, you know, £24,000 going to the Cayman Islands, you know, supposedly on business from the Parliament in this country. I'm sorry, that's not what you're paid for, matey. Stay in this country. Understand that the public deserve to be treated properly and without being disrespected by you, and don't think you're entitled to anything, because you're not. You're a public servant. You're bloody well behaved like one. Now, big announcement for you. Round 2 of Morning Glory's bumper sticker campaign giveaway is here. I know a lot of you have been asking for when your bumper sticker could arrive. A lot of you applied for one. A lot of you didn't get one. I'll tell you why. Because we had thousands and thousands of people who wanted one, and we didn't have enough. So we printed a batch more, a load more. Another batch is right now here in our hot little hands. I've got one here. I'll show it to you. Look at it, Home of Common Sense. You could win this one. In fact, I'll write on the back of it if you want. We might have another golden ticket as well. Join the Common Sense revolution now. Get your hands on a free limited edition bumper sticker. Now listen to this, right? This is how you do it. You head over to talk.tv/sticker. Now, I don't know if we've got a little graphic that says that, but if we haven't, don't worry, we'll work on it. Talk.tv/sticker, and then make sure when you get it, take a photo of it on your vehicle and post the picture on social media. Tag us at talkTV and at IROMG and spread the word. Supplies are limited, though, so head over to talk.tv/sticker. Now, if you have previously requested one and you haven't got it yet, we should be able to get those out to you as well. But listen, have no fear. We will just continue to print these things until nobody else wants them anymore. And believe me, if you start this campaign and you join this Common Sense revolution, you will not regret it. And here's another thing for you, basically. My bosses have started warning me, going, if people are sticking them on their fridges, don't give them to them. They need to put it on the back of a vehicle. Right, so I'm saying you do what you like with it. You stick it on the backside of your jeans if you want. But the point is that, you know, they're not like that here. You know, they don't agree with me on everything. I sometimes have to fight them on these things. So they're saying don't bloody well don't let them put it on anything which nobody can see effectively. So unless you're driving your fridge around the town, don't put it on your fridge. Stick it on the back of a car. Stick it on the back of a wheelchair. Stick it on the back of a bike. Stick it on the outside of your house if you wish, in a window so that people can see it, on a scooter, any other forms of transport you may use, disability scooter, we've had people doing those. But anyway, listen, look, the big campaign is underway again. We've got loads more stickers to give away, so apply for them right here, right now, talk.tv/sticker. There you go. This is Morning Glory. Guess who's coming up next? It's Ben Habib.
We know that this man is a gun-toting, jihad-loving, Jew-hating lunatic that is now wandering the streets. How many of them are coming in here? We have no idea. What we do know is that the consistent pattern of everybody that shows up on these boats is that they are fighting age men from war-torn regions who have a much higher rate of committing crime in the very relatively short period of time they're in this country than do any other category of migrants.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 27 minutes past 7. I don't know where the time is going, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. The sun is up. Well, it's not really up, but it's certainly brighter out there than it was earlier. The darkness has lifted. We are on the morning of a new dawn, of course. It is Tuesday, the 11th of March. Welcome to Morning Glory. We are here for your delectation and appreciation, of course. Ben Habib is going to join us very shortly. We've got lots and lots of you having lots to say about reform. Let's get a voice note from John.
Good morning, Mike. John from West Yorkshire. One of the things you learn as you grow up, or just becomes part of you, is the nuance you pick up about people's appearances, the subtleties within them. And I've never met Nigel Farage, and I've never met Rupert Lowe. But the one thing that comes across in abundance is that Rupert Lowe says it as it is. He's a straight, honest, hard-working businessman who's turned his time and effort into politics and wants to do the right thing by the right people for the people. And he may or may not get frustrated. He may or may not express his anger. Is that such a bad thing? I don't know. Sometimes people have to know where you are and where they're going to. But we live in a woke world where we can't raise our voices anymore, and we can't tell someone they're not doing a good job, that they need to do something differently.
Well, you know, it's fascinating because everybody's got a lot of things to say. Amanda in London says this: reform voters must not desert the party now. Loyal friends stay true no matter what. I'm sure Nigel will be reflecting on the whole episode and lessons will be learned. Mick says, could Farage be finding the work of an MP not to his liking? He wants out bringing everybody down with him. Don't know. Don't know the answer to that. Ben Habib is here, though, and Ben Habib and I have known each other a long time. Ben, very good morning to you. Welcome to Morning Glory. Good morning. I was listening to you last night on Kevin's show, and you spoke very eloquently, as you always do. You've been out front of this story, really, for a long time, before anybody else. You fell out with Nigel Farage, and I don't know if it was Zia Yusuf as well, months and months ago. Do you think, and I mean, I'm going to ask you a whole series of questions this morning, but do you think they don't realise how damaging this is all becoming for them?
So, I mean, I imagine they're waking up to the fact that it's damaging for them. And I say that because there's been a conspicuous absence of any comment from either Nigel Farage or Zia Yusuf over the last 48, 72 hours, apart from the article in The Telegraph, which Nigel wrote, and I think was full of, nonsense.
Well, he gave an interview to ITV last night, or at least we've got a couple of clips from it. I missed it as well, to be honest. In fact, why don't we just play that, because we've played it already a couple of times this morning, and it hasn't gone down that well with reform voters. Have a look.
Look, there is a behavioural problem here. There has been a behavioural problem for some months. Outbursts, anger, that kind of thing. Frankly, I've tried to put it all to the back of my mind. We've all tried to put it to the back of our minds. And as I say, I'm not prejudging anything on these allegations of a bullying culture going on in his offices. But I put it to you, any party who had a senior figure that was facing those accusations would have to act in some way. Mr. Lowe has made a whole series of comments about the KC's investigation, all of which have proved to be wrong. He's then out today saying there is no accusation against him at all, when actually there is. So I'm afraid we're not quite getting the full facts of this. Look, you know what? I could do without this. It's a huge distraction for the party, for me, for everybody.
I think it's more than a distraction, isn't it, Ben?
I think it goes to the fundamental heart of the integrity of Nigel Farage. He says that Rupert has got a case to answer. I say absolutely not. I've been through it with Rupert in detail, precisely what these allegations are by these two women. They don't involve Rupert. They're not aimed at Rupert. And the notion that Zia Yusuf, who Rupert hasn't seen since the 13th of December, should file a complaint to the police, suggesting he was threatened verbally with violence by Rupert, is an absurdity. As you and I know, and I'm sure every single viewer, listener to this program knows, Rupert is described by his colleagues, and I can testify to it, as a teddy bear. I mean, he's just a lovely man. And frankly, if Zia Yusuf can't take some hurty words, he shouldn't be part of a party which bangs the drum for freedom of speech and the tolerance of offence. You know, that's the whole point about freedom of speech and democracy. And what Nigel just said there, so I just want to reverse one bit. And the other reason I know this is a whole load of garbage is because this is the playbook that Reform UK has used to displace dozens and dozens and dozens of good people across the country. Members of grassroots who stood shoulder to shoulder with me, putting this party on the map, have been in a wholesale manner removed from the party, and not just removed, but rubbished as they've been removed. Many being accused of being racist, many accused of all sorts of other things. So they've had their reputation damaged. And in the case of Rupert Lowe, they've used that same playbook to try and rubbish him, but they've gone further this time. That complaint to the police, no matter how frivolous it is, it's designed actually to destroy Rupert. Because you can imagine, you know, there are miscarriages of justice. You make a false complaint to the police, by some miracle it gets carried, Rupert ends up in prison. I mean, what kind of behaviour is that from Nigel Farage and Yusuf? And, you know, one might have suggested 5 days ago, well, that's just Yusuf, sack him, and Nigel can regain the moral high ground. But Nigel has doubled down again and again and again. It is now Nigel and Yusuf. It is the Nigel and Yusuf that they're on the wrong side of this debate. And I had said, I think last week, that Yusuf should be sacked. I now think, absolutely unequivocally, Nigel Farage hasn't got the integrity required to deliver this country from the evils it faces, and Nigel Farage must therefore resign. And he should make Rupert Lowe leader of Reform and get off the page and get out of the way. We don't need his narcissistic circus running Reform. We need serious people who are committed to this country, who put this country first, put the people first, who don't constantly think about their own personal progression, who are thinking about others. Rupert, as you know, is only in this, I'm sure you know this, Mike, is only in this because he fears for the future of the country.
Yeah.
And he's given up his parliamentary salary to charity.
Yeah.
That's how serious he is about the whole thing. Nigel, in the meantime, is swanning about between the UK and the US, hardly turns up in his constituency, makes very few written questions in Parliament, hasn't made an impact. I mean, Nigel is just the you know, he's the sort of proverbial circus show. That's what he is.
Right.
And he's a circus show without depth, without breadth, and now quite a malign circus show because he's trying to destroy a good man. And that, for me, is abominable. And he's crossed the Rubicon, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Nigel Farage is not fit to be Prime Minister of this country.
Well, listen, we've offered him the opportunity to come on and talk for himself. You know, you've made a lot of allegations there, and you know, I can say I agree with him or I don't agree with him, but we'd love him to come on and actually answer some of these allegations that you're making, but he doesn't seem to want to, so it's all very strange. He wants to go and talk to ITV, he wants to go and talk to LBC, doesn't want to come and talk to Talk, which is largely a very big part of what the Reform movement actually became, because, you know, in the early days, Ben, you were very much part of it as well, and we were the people that gave oxygen to an awful lot of your views and his views and everybody else's views, you know. But, you know, I don't quite understand what is going on. I don't really get it. What I wanted to ask you was about your previous incarnation in Europe, you know, when you were part of the team for the Brexit Party and you were MEPs there. I mean, was there any indication in those days that Nigel Farage was likely to do the kinds of things that he's doing now, for example?
There was every indication, I'm afraid. I was very new to politics then, and I come to politics from business, where, actually, believe it or not, Mike, or perhaps believe it very easily, the standards for morality and professionalism in business are much, much higher than in politics. And when I joined the Brexit Party, I was a member of Nigel's party. He was leader. I did absolutely everything that was asked of me by him. I didn't question it. I just thought, right, he's the leader. I do what I'm told. And I followed him. And then things started going wrong during the general election. Nigel rightly called the withdrawal agreement that Boris Johnson wanted to put into place as a sellout. And then he went on to stand down 317 Brexit Party candidates against Boris Johnson, including people like Theresa May had the opposition from Brexit Party removed, and delivered Boris Johnson into power, knowing that the withdrawal agreement was lousy. He then vacated the battlefield, claiming Brexit was done. And for me, that was the moment. That was when I suddenly realized this man ain't serious, because Brexit is not done by a long chalk. We've left Northern Ireland behind, and the deal that Boris Johnson did hitched us at the hip with the European Union. Now, I understand that we had to take various steps to prevent a second referendum, Jeremy Corbyn, second referendum, all of that. But a serious man who is committed to this country would call it as it is, say Brexit's not done, and I am Mr. Brexit, as Nigel Farage is. I'm going to stay on the political battlefield, and I'm not going to leave it until this country is delivered from the threats of the EU, delivered fully out of the EU. He didn't do it. He swanned off for 4 years, making money, which is fine. That's his prerogative. Every individual has a right to themselves and an obligation to themselves to better their own lives and make money. That's fine. But then he swung back in on the 3rd of June to leader of reform and started setting aside everything that Richard Tice, Rupert Lowe, myself and others had created, including, of course, me. And, you know, Rupert says he hasn't had a chance to speak to Nigel Farage. Well, let me tell viewers something really interesting. I haven't spoken to Nigel Farage once since he came back, since he appointed himself leader on the 3rd of June. I didn't even know he was going to appoint himself leader on the 3rd. I was the deputy leader at the time. I had no discussion about him coming back as leader. I had no forewarning. I found out during the press conference. And I talked to my team, including people like Kate Hoey, and I said to Kate, I asked Kate, I want to resign because this man has just come back. He's acting like a despot immediately, like he used to in the Brexit Party. I want to resign. And Kate Hoey said to me, Ben, don't do it. We're in the middle of a general election. Whatever gripe you've got with Nigel Farage, you have it out at the end of the general election. And I took her advice and the advice of my inner circle, who said, Ben, you've just got to toe the line during the general election. But behind the scenes, what I was doing was saying to Nigel Farage and to Richard Tice, who was obviously my leader, you know, he was the one who brought me into the party, you've got to democratize the party. I knew that this party could not succeed if it was left in the control of Nigel Farage. It needed, he could be the leader, sure, no problem with that. But you've got to have processes, checks and balances and everything else in place so the good people coming into the party have the ability to be heard, that he can't act like the despot, narcissistic despot that he is. And I've been banging that drum for the democratization of the party, not because of any personal interest. I couldn't care less. I genuinely couldn't care less about my personal political position. It's so that reform is able to bring in the kinds of people it needs to deliver the country from the precipice. And, you know, we're not in normal times, Mike. In normal times, you might just say, well, you know, get on a whole load of MPs, we'll form a government, we'll think about it later. We are in times where this country needs a 180-degree change in direction. You need proverbial Samsons in the next government. Each of them have to be Herculean, Samsonite in their ability to deliver the United Kingdom to safety. And Nigel will never allow them to do it because his narcissistic nature wants to cut down anyone that seems to be a rival. And I'm utterly convinced that Rupert himself had a mark on his back the minute Elon Musk endorsed him, because that's when Nigel was like, oh my goodness, I've got a guy in the party who's more popular across the Atlantic than I am, and Rupert is proving to be more popular in the UK than Nigel Farage is, and he can't bear it, so he wants to take Rupert out. And So what I'm trying to say here is that no genuinely Samsonite Herculean people, the kind that are required to save this country, will be allowed to flourish in reform under Nigel. And to try and destroy Rupert, not just discredit him, but to destroy him, is unacceptable. And therefore, Nigel Farage should resign from reform.
Ben Habib, thank you very much indeed. Former Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Of course, there's talk that he and Rupert Lowe may get together and form a separate party. But that wouldn't help really, I don't think, with the dislodging of Labour, with the dislodging of the Tories, and with a new beginning for a new, what you might call centre-right party. It's all very depressing, really, isn't it? It's 7:42. Coming up, we're going to speak to Katie Amess, daughter of Sir David Amess, of course. She had some very bad news given to her yesterday when Yvette Cooper basically turned around and said, we're not going to bother doing an investigation and a probe into what happened to Sir David Amess, despite the fact that his daughter's asking for it, despite the fact that the people are asking for it, despite the fact that common decency is asking for it. So thanks a lot to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who's doing a terribly bad job. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:44, very nearly 7:45 in the morning. Basically, lots of you very, very upset and very annoyed about what is going on. Margaret says this from Birmingham. How sad this infighting with reform. I think Nigel will go and work in America and Rupert Lowe will start a new party. Well, it's difficult to know exactly what to think, isn't it? Mark says reform members know who Rupert Lowe is, but the British public have no idea who he is and don't care what he says. If Lowe speaks, the British public don't care. If Farage speaks, they listen. It's as simple as that. And Lisa says, morning, Mike, I feel that strongly about what they have done to Rupert Lowe. I've told them they are now officially woke, and if they expel him, I'll cancel my membership. I will vote Conservative, says Lisa in Hertford. I think the problem is an awful lot of people are basically worried that reform have gone woke, and they've somehow called in the police, they've somehow called in the HR departments, and this is not what they're supposed to do. too. But let's get serious about a much bigger story in a way, because reform and what goes on inside of the party is a mere sideshow compared to what happened yesterday. The daughter of MP Sir David Amess accused the Home Secretary of betrayal after she rejected the family's call for a public inquiry into his murder. Katie Amess has spoken to us on many occasions here at Talk. We're very proud of her. We think she's doing an amazing job, and she's an amazing woman, and a great absolute tribute to her father, who of course was murdered by somebody who was supposed to be on the watch list by Prevent, who was a terrorist, who had nothing but hatred in his heart, and who took the life of a great man. Casey, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you so much for having me back on.
No, not at all. Listen, you're doing an amazing job. You're still doing an amazing job, but you were obviously quite upset yesterday when you heard the news that the Yvette Cooper has decided, basically, it's hard to see how an inquiry would be able to go beyond the trial of the terrorist. I'm not going to give his name because I don't think we should even bother to name this scumbag. What is it that you think is preventing her from wanting to do this inquiry?
Well, we have absolutely no idea. It's just mind-boggling because this is, you know, it's not unusual that there would be an inquiry into something as grave as this, where there's so many unanswered questions. And I mean, Southport immediately had an inquiry, and obviously that is exactly what should have happened in that situation. And then Nottingham was given an inquiry a couple of weeks ago. So why on earth can't we have an inquiry? And when I met with Yvette Cooper in October, she said that she was figuring out ways to help us and that possibly we could be included within the scope of the Southport one. So then just to receive this letter saying, no, you're not getting an inquiry, we're going to do a paper review of a paper review by somebody who we choose to do the review, is just bewildering, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Rad Seiger sitting there with you, family advisor and spokesperson. Rad, let me just ask you, is there anything more you can do to try and put more pressure on the Home Secretary or the government in general?
Mike, good morning. Yes, absolutely. And the decision that the government has made is completely irrational and illogical. The family still do not have the answers as to what led to the events of the murder of Sir David, and why and how and who let this, as you say, scumbag go when he was a known threat. So what we're doing with the family is meeting with the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary tomorrow, and simply, Mike, they've got to reconsider. We think they've had bad legal advice. They've had bad advice from officials. You cannot have an inquiry into Southport without having an inquiry into Sir David. They're absolutely identical cases. So we're just going to go to Downing Street tomorrow and absolutely invite them to reconsider their position.
Yes, Casey, I mean, must be taking a terrible toll on you personally. I mean, you've obviously got incredible stamina and a great belief in getting justice for your dad and for your family. How are you feeling about all of this right now?
I mean, this happened to my father in 2021. Obviously, it's now 2025. It's taken over my entire life. I can't sleep, I can't eat, I can't function because I cannot rest when I know that the answers to the questions that we deserve are being hidden from us and covered up and swept under the rug. So my life is ruined. I just beg Yvette Cooper and Sir Keir Starmer to reconsider and think about his grieving family and just do the decent thing and give us some answers. And so all I can do is pray to God that tomorrow they're going to change their mind and put us out of this additional heartbreak.
Because you're meant to be meeting with the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, tomorrow, right?
Yeah, and that is a meeting that he called us to.
Right.
So we were thinking, oh, they're going to announce an inquiry. And then we asked if we could bring the press with us, and he said no. So that's when alarm bells started going off, because he allowed press at Nottingham when he did announce the inquiry.
Right.
So that had me thinking, well, hang on a minute. He obviously doesn't want whatever he's going to say to be broadcast. So then Rad stepped in and said, you need to tell us what the meeting is about.
Right.
And that is the letter that we got saying no inquiry.
Right. I can't understand how he's going to sit with you in the same room and say that your father does not deserve an inquiry. I mean, how brazen and awful would that be? I mean, I'm not a big fan of Keir Starmer's, but I'm glad he's meeting you. But I can't imagine how he's going to put that.
It's going to be embarrassing for him.
I mean, Mike, they've got no choice now. The Tory party came out yesterday. Their official position now is they will hold an inquiry into Sir David's murder when they come into power, if they ever do. So, as I say, I think this is just, a bad legal advice, bad advice from officials. And, they at the very least, they've got to agree to go away and look at this again, because, as you say, Mike, it is completely illogical.
Yeah, it really is. And as I say, I mean, apart from just the shame of it, the Prime Minister surely will have to give some kind of ground here, won't he?
They will. They will. I'm very confident.
Yeah. Katie, I mean, what is your best hope that you get from Starmer tomorrow?
That he will go away and reconsider and just see, my mum is coming with me to the meeting, so just see the grief and the heartbreak that they are still causing us as a family. And just from a human perspective, he was friends with my dad. He came to his funeral. This isn't a political game. It's not the Tories versus Labour. I'm not in this for politics. I'm not in this for fame. I just want the answers. So hopefully he'll see us from a human perspective and just take pity on us and change his mind.
Yeah, well, we wish you all the best of luck with it, and do come back on and tell us what happened on Thursday if you can. That would be great. Katie, thank you very much indeed. Rad Saiger as well. Katie Amess there. What a great woman. Unbelievable power and absolute and utter, courage to do what she's doing. She's going to see Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer needs to do the right thing here, and they need to launch an inquiry. They need to find out what went wrong with Prevent. We've spoken, of course, about it many times. Lord Carlisle, some of you might remember, came on to say that, by and large, Prevent does a great job. Yeah, well, it doesn't, does it? Because obviously, if it did, it would do what it says on the tin, and on the tin it says Prevent, and in the real world, it doesn't prevent. So that's, I'm afraid, bad news for everyone. T says this, Tom from Yorkshire, bumper stickers, can we stick it on the pushchair? Yeah, you can. Absolutely. Push it. As long as it's something that you're taking out with you, that's the idea. The idea is not to hide it in your house so nobody sees it. One from Chris who says, Reform, we need change, and it seems we have been duped. Reform seems to be just like every other political party. The rise to power and popularity seems to corrupt them. Hope is going out of the window once again. And this is how an awful lot of people feel. Here's one from Sean in Norfolk. I received a personal email from Rupert Lowe as I shared my support for him as a constituent of his, I should say. He's always been a gentleman when I met him, so he'll have my support over Reform. Yeah, I don't think Nigel Farage realises quite how much power the people have in this situation. Russ in Devon says, Mike, politics is now well and truly dead in this country. A government that is driving the country into the ground and unfit to govern. An opposition so divided it argues with itself rather than for the people. And the shining light now in turmoil, all because of one man and his toxic comments. Nowhere to go now, Mike. Not one party is worth voting for. We are in for years of no progress, division and decline. What an utter mess. Russ, I'm sorry to say you're probably right. Let's get a voice note from Pete.
Hi Mike, Pete from Lincolnshire, great show. Regarding the Farage fiasco, I think Nigel possibly should consider standing down, allowing the party to be a total democratic party where they can elect a leader. With regard to people saying that they're going to go back and vote Conservative if Generic leads, I mean, that's just ridiculous. They're obviously not reformers in the first place. Admittedly, what Farage has done is very bad, or appears to be very bad, but I just can't believe that people are considering going back to Conservatives after they've been in power for 14 years and abused us. Prior to that, they were trying to get into power, so there's another, 4 years. So they've been around making promises to us for 18 years and delivered very little on it.
Interesting stuff. 5 minutes to 8. We've got lots more to do. Stay where you are. This is Morning Glory.
and he was able to stay up there for extraordinarily 16 hours. Massive, big sort of security. Everybody and his mum turned up after the fact he'd climbed up there. A, how was he able to climb up there? B, why wasn't he shot immediately and brought down? And C, at what point are we going to think that we might actually want to provide proper protection to the building which is the home of our democracy?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the one place to get common sense. It's the home of common sense. We've been talking about reform an awful lot this morning. Lots of you reacting to what Ben Habib had to say. And, of course, many of you agree with him. Many of you disagree with him. That is the point of politics. That is the point of what we do here. A lot of people saying, why do you keep giving oxygen and publicity to Ben Habib? Well, Ben Habib has many things to say. He's got a lot of insight into what goes on inside of reform. We spoke to him, of course, as well about what happened during the Brexit Party days over in Europe. There's nobody more in support of reform and their agenda in this building than I am. However, they are completely screwing it all up. And people who say, why don't you talk to Nigel Farage? Well, we've asked him to come on the show. Why don't we talk to Richard Tice? We've asked him to come on the show. Why don't we talk to Zia Yusuf? I saw Zia Yusuf just before Christmas at a party. I said, you should really come on the show a bit more. He agreed to do so. He's nowhere to be seen. They're hiding. They're not talking. They're not being willing to be pinned out. They're not being willing to actually be asked questions. And so, unfortunately, therefore, the vacuum must be filled by those who will say things. And Ben Habib's one of them. We've got more coming up, of course, right here on the home of common sense. This is Morning Glory.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament. To respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning now from 6 a.m. Sharp. If you haven't been there since 6, I don't mind. I don't hold any grudge against you, but you really want to get part of the programme at 6 o'clock, because we had Bob Seeley on this morning going through all the papers, and lots of really, really big stories in the papers to talk about, including the fact that foul play has not been ruled out in the tanker collision in the North Sea. We've got Mark Carney being made the Prime Minister of Canada, even though he was never actually elected. We've got, of course, one phone stolen every 7 minutes in London. That's another story. 4,000 dinghy illegals is a brand new record. That's in the Sun today on page 20. And foreigners commit a quarter of sex crimes in this country. That's a big story on the Daily Telegraph's front page as well. Let's get a voice note from Donny on Smashing the Gangs.
Hi, Mike. It's Donny in the Isle of Lewis. I want to know the answer to a question. What has Keir Starmer done to smash the gangs? 4,000 people come in this year, a new record. What's happening with the smuggling guns? What's happening with them? I don't think he's smashing anything.
Very good, Donny, and great to hear from the Isle of Lewis. What a beautiful part of the world that is. You don't want to be stuck up there in the middle of a winter's cold storm, that's for sure, but a wonderful part of Scotland. A very good impersonation there of the smuggling guns, as Keir Starmer would say. What has he done to stop the guns? What has he done to stop the smuggling guns? Nothing, basically. The square root of sweet FA. There we are, that's exactly what he's done. 0-0. Nothing at all. He's going to be seeing Katie Amess at least on tomorrow, I think. So at least let's hope he orders an inquiry into how her father was killed. We're going to talk about Donald Trump and the peace plan for Ukraine. That's all going on in Saudi Arabia today. Volodymyr Zelensky heading over there. We'll keep you abreast of all of that. And also, people who are hired because of diversity at the BBC are actually paid more than people who are not. How ridiculous is that? And they've wasted, believe it or not, another £5 million of our money sorting out their various scandals, from Tim Westwood to Hugh Edwards to Jimmy Savile and all the rest of it. Absolutely and utterly ridiculous, utterly shaming for the BBC. Got this from Mark, who says, Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe are simply jealous of Nigel Farage, nothing more and nothing less. We'll bring you more on that story, of course, as well, throughout the course of the day. Ryan Saby joins us, Deputy Political Editor at The Sun. Also, Andrew Griffith, MP, Shadow Business Secretary, is here as well. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome back to Morning Glory. Got this from Liam, who says Nigel got away with getting shot of Ben due to him not getting his seat as an MP, but he won't get away with this. He's the party's dictator, and no party will move forward or succeed with good people under that guise. Well, let's talk to Ryan Saby, who is, of course, Deputy Political Editor at The Sun. Ryan, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
The story that won't go away, really, is this sort of internecine battle going on inside of Reform. I watched an interview with Rupert Lowe last night on Dan Wootton's show. It looks very much as though he's probably not going back to become a Reform MP. The question, I suppose, is whether the damage limitation which is currently trying to be exercised by Nigel Farage is going to work, because it seems to me that with every day that passes, reform gets weaker and weaker.
Yeah, reform, it seemed like everything was going so well for them. They were doing extremely well in the polls. They were leading in several polls, capitalising on the government's very, very difficult start to their term in office. And then all of a sudden we had a few words from Rupert Lowe last week criticising the leadership of Nigel Farage. You bring that on top of the fact that Elon Musk's called out Nigel Farage and his leadership. And it seemed like Elon Musk was having a bit of a love-in with Rupert Lowe on social media as well. So, and I think all this came to a head last week in an interview that Rupert Lowe gave, and then Reform will say they were acting with due diligence and going through the right procedures to report certain incidents to the police. There are internal issues as well on his behaviour. But it does, from the outside looking on, it does look like obviously some sort of knee-jerk reaction to Rupert Lowe's popularity and it being able to have his voice heard sometimes more loudly than Nigel Farage's in some instances. But they had it all. But every time they were on the front foot, this has pulled them back a bit. And just very quickly on this point, there's a by-election coming up.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, Mike Ainsbury's seat up in Runcorn. Even though Labour had a commanding majority in this seat, you do wonder when it comes to a by-election whether that second-place party, in this case Reform, could give it a real go. The government have got so many issues, so many things on their plate. They've had a little bit of a bounce, obviously, on Ukraine, but you just wonder, in those confines of the by-election, whether they could actually get another seat. Things would look on the up for Reform, but it seems like they've taken one step forward and two steps back.
Well, that is the problem, and I was going to ask you what you think of that whole kind of, I suppose the atmosphere now around what you would call not just the Reform Party, but Ben Habib, who's just been speaking to us there, Rupert Lowe, who does appear to be pretty popular within the groupings of Reform. I mean, would there be, do you think, because by-elections can be so strange, I mean, would there be anything in it, perhaps, if Rupert Lowe stood as an independent, if Ben Habib stood as an independent, could they have a chance of winning that seat?
This is always the problem when it comes to by-elections. Now, if there's a local issue that Ben Habib could actually sort of grab hold onto, there could be a chance. But I think the trouble is, once you've got that infrastructure and you've got the volunteers, the people knocking on the doors, that takes a long time to build up. So it may be difficult for an insurgent. That's why it was there, primed, ready for Reform to actually come in and give that seat a really, really good shot. Now, it would have been really, really difficult Reform, but for someone else coming in from the outside, it's going to be even more difficult. But as Rupert Lowe said last week, there just needs to be an element of discipline within the party ranks just to get through to the local elections. People don't vote for divided parties, and you've got big elections coming up over the next couple of years, where it's local elections here, Welsh Assembly elections, where the Reform were meant to be looking to do really well. And this will just take the edge off that a little bit.
Well, do you know what's interesting as well, for me anyway, Ryan, and it's that all of this, even though it might be considered to be a small party and relatively, unimportant in the scheme of things, it's kind of taken the heat a bit off Keir Starmer and the Labour government as well, hasn't it? Because nobody's really talking about anything that Labour are doing or failing to do. All everybody's talking about is reform. Yeah,
there's a big issue at Westminster. The government have got their own problems to deal with, but the thing is, once you get into that commanding position in those opinion polls, like Reform have done over the last few weeks, where they've been leading in several and really nipping at the heels of Labour, you're there really to be shot at, and it has taken the heat. Keir Starmer has got the spring statement coming up at the end of the month. He's got big issues, obviously, over Ukraine and trying to bring together that coalition of the willing. So as much as Keir's got that on one hand, it does seem like a lot of Westminster sort of chatter has been sort of focused around this. So the government have got many things to be getting on with, but on this front, Reform need to get their own house in order.
Yeah, they absolutely do. I've just got a new statement from Rupert Lowe, which basically he says he's been asked to put out by his entire parliamentary team. As Rupert's entire parliamentary team, we feel obliged to take the unusual step of publishing this statement on the record. Rupert has had no involvement in the organisation or drafting of this letter. Some of us have worked with Rupert for years, some for months, one for nearly 30 years. We want to state this unequivocally. Rupert is a good, decent and honest man. I mean, obviously there's quite a few paragraphs of that. Rupert is a good MP. It finishes up with a good boss, a good man. He does not deserve what is happening to him. It seems to me, I don't know about you, Ryan, that he's winning the PR war here. And Nigel Farage is emerging as somebody who can't take any criticism and can't understand why he would share a platform with anyone who might be a threat to him.
Yeah, and that's the trouble for sort of Nigel Farage and the Reform leadership. They just need to sort of rise above this, and I think Rupert Lowe, as you say, he is winning that PR battle. There has been lots of support for him. Lots of people have seen him, doing good work in Parliament, raising important issues.
Yeah.
But you look on the other hand with Reform, they will say that they've had questions raised about Rupert Lowe's behaviour, and they've gone straight to the police. But from the outside looking in, it just doesn't. It feels very odd with how Rupert Lowe does that interview last week, and within a matter of sort of 48, 72 hours, that Reform leadership are speaking to the police, reporting his behaviour to the authorities. Something just doesn't feel quite right about it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's talk a little bit about some other things going on. The Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, under increasing pressure after it was revealed last week that he was swanning around the world spending 250,000 quid's worth of taxpayers' money. It then emerged that many of the trips he was accompanied by his wife. He now is in the papers this morning saying that he has to correct the record on expenses for one of his jaunts to Gibraltar. I mean, this is really getting bad, isn't it, for this guy?
Yeah, Lindsay Hoyle seen as a popular guy normally around Westminster, but I think once you start delving into his travel arrangements, it's the actual sums involved start to add up. I think £250,000 was spent, and there's questions about his wife accompanying him as well.
Yes.
And I know sometimes that a lot of these events there's a spousal program as well, so she would be invited. But I think one thing they need to be very, very clear about now and in the future, that if his wife does go on any trips, that it's not paid for by the British taxpayer. Somehow there's some money found, whether that's privately or whether the host nation actually step in and pay for that. So it's been uncomfortable now because we've had about a week, 10 days of this coverage now, and they can't seem to shake it off actually.
Yeah, no, that is the problem, isn't it? And the other big story, I suppose, is Shabana Mahmood, isn't it, and the Sentencing Commission, and a bit of a row going on there because she issued a statement last week basically saying, despite what we knew, that her own operative was in the meeting when they discovered or decided to put this guideline out, that she was against it. She said the Labour government did not support it. She doesn't support it. But the Sentencing Commission lawyers and judges have now come back and gone, keep your nose out of it. We'll do what we like.
Yeah, quite extraordinary. I think here we see that complete separation between the judiciary and the state. We had the leading judge yesterday saying, after all the hullabaloo over recent days on this issue, the leading judge there saying, keep your hands out of this one. This is not one for you. We are independent. The state, as in the state, actually prosecutes these people, and it's up to the judiciary to make those decisions on sentencing. But it seems like Shabana Mahmood will be calling in people around us in and around the Sentencing Council, the leaders there, in for talks over this week. And I think the trouble is, they just have to thrash out this issue because the perception of having a two-tier justice system is not palatable for the British public.
It really isn't. Let's have a look at what she actually said to Robert Jenrick last week on this.
Mr. Speaker, the The Shadow Secretary of State asked the question, how did we get here? I'll tell him how we got here. His administration and the 14 years they had in power and the absolute mess they made of the criminal justice system, a mess that this government is clearing up.
Well, that's what she says, but it doesn't look like that, does it?
No, I mean, when that question came up at the back end of last week, it did seem to me as if the Labour front bench were caught off guard a little bit with that question, and also with her answer. There wasn't too much detail about that. It was a very, very stock phrase answer to a very important issue. And I think now Shabana Mahmood is now obviously trying to get to grips with this and actually try and thrash out. There is talk of possibly legislating to get around that, but we'll see, because that guidance there from the Sentencing Council yesterday, they weren't moving at all.
No, quite. Exactly right. Ryan, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. And definitely political editor at The Sun, of course. We're going to have a look at, once again, King Charles and his playlist in a minute. Let's get a voice note first from John.
Good morning, Mike. John from London here. I have to go along with Elon Musk. Elon Musk said he's not the person to lead the party. Nigel is a good talker. He's very good at talking, but he's not very good at listening. As Rob said, he wants to be liked all the time. You know, he wants to be the centre of attention. So I think, you know, he's going to be like, if he doesn't listen to his own party, he won't listen to the people. You know, when the people ask him to do something, he won't listen to the people. If he can't listen to a few people inside his party, what chance has he got listening to the people?
Well, this is part of the problem that people are now seeing, that if you can't command a group of 5 people, 5 men, one of whom is obviously yourself, so 4 men basically as MPs, then what chance have you got of commanding a much bigger parliamentary party? What chance have you got of selecting the right people? What chance have you got of convincing the people who voted for you that you know what you're doing? And I think that is the thing that has shocked so many people. I mean, Nigel Farage has not put a foot wrong since before the election, right? He managed to get 5 MPs elected when people thought he might not even get a seat himself. You know, the naysayers were going, oh, well, he's never won a seat really properly, despite his great victory in the Brexit Party, despite winning the number of seats that he won in the parliamentary party in Brussels, where he was by far and away the biggest party that they'd ever seen. The fact that he has been successful in all manner of different things that he's done has led people to believe that he's a very smart guy. And he is a very smart guy. And I mean, you know, I know Nigel well, known him for many years. Many of us here at Talk do. But the fact is that he's making a complete dog's breakfast of all of this, and nobody can quite understand why. It doesn't make any sense. Can somebody give me some insight as to why it's going so badly wrong for him? And Rupert Lowe, as I say, has now just put out a statement from his employees, and they're all named, by the way. They are people who work for him in his team in Westminster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 names. Jane Sheldrake, Jess Rogers, Will Peacock, Alistair Harrison, Liam Porter, Katerina Petrenko, Jonathan Whedon. Rupert's team basically saying that he's a great guy. All of these allegations about him are wrong. He's never been in any way rude to them. He's never been in any way violent or vicious about them or with them. He's been nothing but kind to all of us, going above and beyond to make us feel comfortable and welcomed in the office. To put it simply, we all love working for him. I mean, sorry. So if you're on the Nigel Farage side of this one, I'm afraid you're going to lose. Simple as that. Now, talking about unusual things that you weren't expecting, how about the King? Yesterday we mentioned that Charles had put out a playlist which included things like the Miriam Makeba song, the Click song, and including words from Dame Kiri T. Kanawa, E.T. Iwi, Call to the People, and also Hot, Hot, Hot from Arrow. How can you explain this one to us, King? Have a go.
This very last song is one of my particular favourites. It is Upside Down by Diana Ross. Kylie Minogue came to St James's Palace to perform this song in 2012 in advance of the Diamond Jubilee visit to Australia. We had a large reception for Australians in the United Kingdom, and as Kylie is an ambassador for my now King's Trust, she very generously agreed to come and perform. The song is The Locomotion, and this is music for dancing. Again, it has that infectious energy which makes it, I find, incredibly hard to sit still.
You really do you, King? Upside down, now you turn me upside down. Who's to say what's impossible and can't be found? I don't want this feeling to go away. Upside down you turn me, round and round you turn me, upside down. That's the King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I mean, I suppose you might say that he's a bit with it. But is he, though? Maybe he's a bit without it. I don't know. It's 9... no, it's not. It's 8:22.
Tanker and the other ship, the Sulong, have crashed. They're both alight. There were 23 people on the Stena, and all of those have been brought to shore and accounted for, and 14 people, I understand, on the Sulong, of whom 13 of the 14 have been accounted for, and there's one person, this is the briefing I had a couple of hours ago, in hospital.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 25 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. This from Kenny in Edinburgh about Bob Seeley, who was in during the first hour of the show. Can you tell Bob Seeley to move to Edinburgh and run for the Edinburgh West seat where I live? The man is a common sense politician, which is a rare thing in Scotland these days. You know you want to. And Jenny says, unfortunately, the Abu Wadi arrest occurs only because he has threatened Jewish people. However, the threats to Christians, women and children and our British society by all illegal immigrants appears to be not a problem to this government. Amazingly quick response for a threat to Jewish people. How come this has not occurred for our Christian community? Well, I suspect it was all of the above, really, wasn't it? And the fact that this guy is an absolute scumbag and should not be anywhere near our shores, I think is the main problem. The problem we all, of course, face is that at the end of the day, We've got more of those kinds of people coming into this country, whether they're Palestinian terrorists, whether they're Syrian terrorists, whether they're Moroccan terrorists, Algerian terrorists, whether they're going to be committing violent sex crimes like so many of the Afghans who come to this country, like so many of the people who come here from Eritrea. You know, the fact is we don't know who most of them are. And unfortunately, we've caught this one guy, that's great. But, you know, it's a beginning and it's not the end, is it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's talk to Noah Hoffman now, political correspondent at The Sun, because today, in a big piece on page 12, I should say, Mercy Muroki has written about the numbers of people coming to this country. We did this story last week, who basically don't speak English. And she says, as 1 million people struggle with our language, I couldn't speak it when I first came to Britain, but I was determined to learn. If others don't do the same, they shouldn't be allowed to settle here. And I think that's a very fair point. Noah, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I think we were all a bit shocked when we saw this story last week in The Sun. 1 million people in England can't speak English. I think it was something like 137,000 who couldn't speak any English at all, and a bigger number, perhaps around 800,000 or so, who just weren't very good at it.
Yeah, it is truly shocking statistic, and it just really rams home the point that for a lot of immigrants and a lot of immigrant communities, integration is just not something being taken seriously. I mean, these people are very lucky to have been welcomed into the UK. Whether they should be in such large numbers is, of course, something that most people would disagree with. But I mean, a very, very basic first step of giving thanks for being welcomed into such a brilliant country as the United Kingdom is learning to speak the language.
Well, you would think. And I guess what it also tells us is that there are pockets of communities in this country where you can live without having to speak to anybody in English. And I think that is the sort of unspoken part of this story, which nobody's really said.
Yeah, and I don't know why stating a fact is so controversial, because what you've said, Mike, isn't some sort of hot take or some edgy opinion. It is just a fact that there are increasingly little pockets of communities across the UK where people in immigrant communities don't really sort of spread out and integrate into the community. And I don't want to by any means say that this applies to everyone, but there are areas where people are just sticking to the language of their native country or their country of birth. And that's a huge problem, because obviously what we're seeing is social cohesion breaking down across the country. And a lot of that is due to the fact that people aren't integrating. And the key starting point to integration is speaking the language.
Right. And a lot of words are spoken, aren't they, by various governments. I think the Tories were at it before. I think Labour have said it as well, that they want some kind of test before people can be given sort of settled status in this country, that you have to be able to speak the language, you have to be able to know things about our constitution and know things about our history and all of that. I mean, is that something that's not really working then?
Well, I mean, there is at the moment the UK citizenship test that sort of asks you questions about what time EastEnders is on TV and tries to sort of grasp how much you've
how many BBC paedophiles can you name, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think that one features in there, but maybe it should. But clearly it isn't working, and clearly the sort of overarching integration strategy, which probably, I don't even think there probably is one, is just not working at all. And a lot of that will be due to like the large numbers that are coming in. Immigration is way too high. That is accepted across the political spectrum from left to right. But among those people who do come, there needs to be a lot more focus on integration, because otherwise what we see is this increasingly divided society. And this term used by one government advisor who did this big study called parallel lives, where effectively people are living in really closed off communities, living parallel lifestyles to people in, say, major cities or in towns where more people speak English. So it's a huge problem.
Right. And of course, an awful lot of these communities as well are sort of, you know, made up of families, aren't they, who have been transported from thousands of miles away to a place where they've never lived before. And so I guess if you are, say, dealing with a big family, you could easily have a family of, I don't know, 10 or 12 people, you know, only one of whom actually speaks English.
Yeah, that's correct. And then when these big families move closer and closer together and sort of fill up suburbs or different areas, then again, that makes it even easier to exist without speaking English. So I think there really needs to be some sort of real big sit down and some really strong thinking where ministers are unafraid to really look at the reality for what it is and consider strategies for changing it, because at the moment it is a dangerous path. If we live in a society, basically a segregated society, nobody wants that. That's what we worked so hard to move away from, but it appears to be coming back. And, you know, if anything, that it should be the anti-racist crowd shouting the loudest about this.
You would think, but they seem very quiet, don't they? Good to talk to you, Noah. Thanks very much indeed. Noah Hoffman there, political correspondent at The Sun, giving us an insight into the piece by Mercy Maroki today on page 12, in which she says that, you know, she was determined to learn English when she moved to this country from where she came from, but sadly not so many other people do. She first arrived from Kenya when she was only 6 years old, and she couldn't speak any English at all. And so she decided she had to learn. But the problem is that, you know, there are people now living in this society of ours, and I'm sure you know them, you've probably been to the areas where they live, who just don't need to speak English, and that's the problem. Because the silos of immigration in this country are such that there are many places where you wouldn't even need to meet another person who spoke English during the course of your working day. And that's surely got to be wrong, hasn't it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. One from Karen, who says this from Plymouth. Morning, Mike. Like so many others, I'm bitterly disappointed in the appalling treatment of Rupert Lowe and the despicable behaviour of Nigel Farage. Reform should have prioritised the democratisation of the party months ago to ensure they had a legitimate, just infrastructure where all members knew where they stood, that transparent policies and procedures were in place and that they were all equal. Oh, yeah. And Sheila from Cambridge, even more disturbingly for Farage and Crown, I've just cancelled my Reform membership as a protest. Two of their best men, Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe, cast aside. It's disgusting. Let's get a voice note from Moz.
I find it absolutely insane that Nigel Farage and the team can't understand that the country needs reform more than they need him. Yes, Nigel Farage is a figurehead of the party, and he's put a lot of voters towards his side. But now we're looking at the 1st of May on the local elections. How the hell does he think we're going to be able to stand in local elections and get the voters on our side when their leaders and the top dogs of the party are falling to pieces? They need to get a grip, grow up, and get a backbone.
Absolutely right, because otherwise it's oblivion. And you will never see a political party created out of nowhere, rising so high, and then suddenly just falling flat on its face. Because that's what's going on at the moment. It is incredible. Brian says this, Mike, did you know the Sentencing Council have refused to reverse the guidelines on giving ethnic minorities lesser sentences? Yes, I did know that. I said it about half an hour ago, and we conversed about it with Ryan Savey from The Sun, but we will be talking more about it coming up with David Spencer, who is, of course, an expert on these matters. Morning, Mike, says Sharon from Staffordshire. Why is this Hoyle man still in his job as a speaker after using taxpayers' money to fund jollies? What a bloody cheek. Absolutely right. Just stop Hoyle. That's what we said last week, and we'll continue to say it until he gives some of the money back, because I think he should give it all back. What the hell does he think he's doing, this bloke? Order! Order! You know, you can't just, you know, take off and charge the British taxpayer for your holidays and your jollies. And don't give me all this guff about, you know, oh, he's representing the British Parliament. Really? Is he? Is he really? No, I don't think so. 8:34.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:37. My name is Mike Graham, and we are, of course, the headquarters of Common Sense. We're the home of Common Sense, and I've got a sticker here for you, just with your name on it, right? A bumper sticker that says the home of Common Sense. You can stick it on the back of your car, stick it on the back of your scooter, stick it on the back of your van, stick it on the back of your lorry, stick it on the back of your taxi, if you wish, stick it on the back of your viable form of transportation, whether it be a pushchair for your kids, or whether it be a mobility scooter, or whether it be any kind of thing. I'm getting pressured, though, not to let anybody have it who's just going to put it on their fridge. People are saying you can't do that. They're getting cheesed off with it. You need to be able to put it somewhere where people can see it. Take a picture of it, send it to us, we'll put it out. It'll be great. And all you've got to do to apply to get one, right, is head over to a place called talk.tv/sticker. talk.tv/sticker. And the Common Sense Revolution will be part of your life. And you get a free limited edition bumper sticker. It's great. And if you're really lucky, I might even sign it. You never know. 0344 499 1000. Jenny in Oxford says, Mike, the Trump government is intentionally crashing US stock markets with the hokey-cokey on-off tariffs. Why? Because then investors will move to treasuries or bonds. This will reduce the interest rates, and then the US can refinance their debt this year at a lower rate. 10-year treasuries down, so it's working. Well, certainly there's been some problems in the US today on the market front. The Nasdaq, I think, down at its lowest level for 2 years. We've also got all manner of other things going on. I think, where is it? Let's see. No, I can't find it now. Oh, no, here we are. Yeah, the Dow and the S&P worst day since December. Nasdaq worst day in over 2 years. So we'll bring you all of that coming up in a moment. Hamish de Bretton Gordon's here, former British Army Colonel. We'll ask him about what's going on in the Middle East today, in Saudi Arabia specifically, where Vladimir Zelensky has gone to do some kind of peace deal with somebody, but we're not quite sure who. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has posted about the BLM Plaza being removed in Washington, D.C. And there it is. You can see them basically dismantling it. This was obviously there since, what, 2020, when Joe Biden was in charge, and they renamed a particular square BLM Plaza, Black Lives Matter Plaza. He's basically taken it down. And I don't know what he's going to call it now. Maybe go back to whatever the original name was. You know, Trump Plaza, no doubt. Let's say hello to Hamish. Very good morning to you, sir.
Mike, hi, good morning.
Good to talk to you. It's looking more and more like the acceptance, if you like, of Ukraine to sort of give up some of the territory that Russia has taken is now kind of almost something that's understood by all parties. But the new conversation now is that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State for the US, has said that it might be necessary for them to give up land that the Russians actually haven't conquered.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah.
You know, the country, first of all, Russia invaded in 2014, took the Crimea and parts of the Donbass, and then again in 2022, and now owns 17% of Ukraine's land. So it seems remarkable, and maybe it is realpolitik, that this is the only way that Ukraine can get the Russian bear off its back. But, you know, in the last 2 weeks, Trump and his team have really done everything to put, you know, Russia in the best possible position, you know, not only tying one hand behind Ukraine's back, but both. So it seems pretty unbalanced. And what concessions is Russia being asked to look at? You know, it seems virtually none at the moment. And the final thing I'd say on this particular piece, Mike, is, you know, from my looking and reading and analysing this situation over the last 3 years, the Russian military is in a pretty shocking position. You know, Trump could throw the American military might behind and actually defeat the Russian army in Ukraine, get back the 17% and push them back to the borders. You know, there's an awful lot on social media about, you know, why this is happening. What on earth, you know, has Moscow got that is forcing Trump down this line? Or is it some brilliant transactional deal that mortals like me just cannot see?
Yes, well, that is the question, isn't it? And I mean, and what about the likelihood that whatever the deal does end up being, that Russia won't come back for more? Because obviously that's a question that Zelensky's been asking, a question that a lot of Ukrainian people have been demanding answers to. How do you guarantee that the Russians will leave Ukraine alone?
Well, absolutely. I think if you analyse why Putin did this in the first place, and without going through the great history, but in effect, he wanted to recreate the old Soviet Union. He felt that Gorbachev and others let the country down. He was back in. He was going to be the Peter the Great of the 21st century. So, yeah, there's absolutely no indication, if he is left in any position, that in a few years' time he won't come back, because he will have not achieved his aims. And we know that autocratic tyrants like Putin, like Hitler, do anything to achieve what they set out to do. So unless the Russian army is in a position where it cannot come back in a few years' time, I think we've got to prepare for it. And Europe, at least now, has woken up that the defence of Europe is our responsibility, and we need to show a really strong hand. And I would like to see the European coalition, led by Macron and Starmer, get more involved in these negotiations, because at the moment I think they're too unbalanced in Moscow's favour.
And at the moment as well, Moscow appears to be under attack from a whole series of drones that have been sent over from Ukraine. We've only been told of one death so far in Moscow, but does this seem a significant sort of, last gasp go at the Russians?
Well, I think certainly, Zelensky and his team are pretty canny, and no doubt they're trying all they can to show that they're still in this fight, and there is fight left in this particular dog, which I think there absolutely is, rather than just have to concede to everything that Trump and Putin want at the moment. And I think, we need to be aware of that. The Ukrainian army isn't out. The Russian army is not as powerful as people think. And the idea of giving up land, and as you said, potentially giving up more, Putin wants Kherson and Zaporizhzhia as well. Which to me, if I was Zelensky, and crikey, of course, he knows far better, would be unacceptable.
Yeah, and so, the peace talks continue, I suppose. There's been some suggestion that Ukraine will run out of weapons if the embargo continues to sort of be in place, the suspension of aid and all of that. Do you expect this all to be kind of rounded off and signed off within the next month or so?
Crikey, Mike, we all hope it is. Everybody wants a peace that Ukraine can accept, and starving them of ammunition and intelligence, is just making it more likely that the Russians will progress, and that there is no, if Putin can see the opportunity with a failing Ukraine military, then he is just going to crack on. I'm aghast, like many military people, of quite, what is the US and Trump trying to achieve here, if it's not to hand all the cards to Putin. But this is where I think Europe needs to take a much stronger role, much more forceful role, and we do have the military capacity to back Ukraine up here. And if America is not prepared to do this, then absolutely fine. Let them concentrate on mainland America, and let Europe try and be more demonstrative in the peace of this continent.
No, sure. Hamish, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, former British Army Colonel, on what is going on with regard to Ukraine and the peace talks today. Volodymyr Zelensky in Saudi Arabia to talk to the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman about all of that. Let's get a voice note from Brian.
Morning, Mike, from Southend. On this reform thing, yesterday I was all for, letting things, progress and see what happens as the party goes on. But the more I sort of read into it and read and listen and hear from Ben Habib, from Rupert Lowe and from all others, it sounds as it's quite a serious problem. And I think the only way for reform to carry on and to go forward is for Nigel Farage to resign. And if he was serious about reform and making this country great again and stopping the rubbish and the woke crap that's going on at the moment, is to resign and Reform have a proper vote for a leader, bring back Rupert Lowe, bring back Ben Hameen, and bring back real proper party members and who will make good MPs. And as I say, if he really wants that to happen, then I think the only way forward is for Farage to resign.
Brian, thanks very much indeed. I mean, has it really come to this? People calling in, asking for Nigel Farage to resign from Reform in order to make it all work. It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, we had Rupert Lowe last night telling Dan Wootton on his show that he's probably not going to go back to Reform as an MP, having had the whip withdrawn by Lee Anderson. This from M in Bath. Mike, most sane people don't give a monkeys regarding behavioural issues, not that I believe them anyway. Rupert Lowe has a great deal of support, and the way in which he's been thrown under the bus is frankly a disgrace. Listening to the superb Ben Habib last night with Kevin, I was reminded of the loss to the party he was as well. Sad times. Well, he was on with us just a little while ago as well. And this as well has come into us this morning from Stuart in Perthshire. Morning, Mike. I've followed Farage for over 20 years, and I used to say he was the best Prime Minister we never had. Now I can't look at the man and wish he'd just disappear into retirement. You can tell from both men who is telling the truth and who is lying. And Nigel has doubled down on his claims about Rupert. It's depressing to realise that someone had you duped for so long, but this fiasco has really exposed him for the narcissist he is. I'm politically homeless once again, as I'll never still vote for the Tories. I mean, this is existentially terrible for the Reform Party. It's quite hard to watch it unfolding, because even yesterday it didn't seem as though it was all unravelling quite as quickly as it is now. But the statement that's been issued by the people who are friends and employees of Rupert Lowe, who have put out a statement just this very morning that says, you know, Rupert is a good, decent and honest man, basically saying he's courteous, loyal, unfailingly polite to us. He's a family man who cares deeply for his wife, his 4 children and 1 young grandson. Rupert has been nothing but kind to all of us, going above and beyond to make us feel comfortable and welcomed in the office. To put it simply, we all love working for him. I mean, you know, it's unequivocal. It's basically going, anybody who says the contrary and that he's got some kind of, you know, behavioural problem is talking absolute baloney. And that's precisely what the Reform kind of line is. It's not credible, I'm afraid. It really isn't. And we've asked them to come on. We've asked them to come and talk to us. They haven't decided to do so, which unfortunately doesn't look great for them, I'm afraid, either. So, where do we all end up? We shall see. Coming up, we're going to talk to Rear Admiral Chris Parry. He's going to give us the latest on the disaster in the North Sea. Front page of The Sun. It goes, hellfire. Tanker full of US war jet fuel and cyanide aboard a ship that hit it. Doesn't sound great, does it, if you live in Hull? I mean, you know, get out as fast as you can. This is Talk.
If I was Zelensky, what I would be doing this week, I'd be offering some sort of wonderful award, you know, a la a an unprecedented second invitation for a state visit with King Charles, to some bravery honour or something to Donald Trump, and showering him with all the praise and all the love and adulation that he wants, to do whatever I'd have to do to get the military aid and intelligence sharing that I needed to save my people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:53. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. From Kevin in Lincolnshire, we have this. With reference to the Reform Party, leaders sometimes have to make unpopular decisions. Nigel has taken a tough line, but it is the stance of a leader. His decision has foundation, but it's unpopular. For Reform to positively succeed in the future, we need the right MPs in the right positions. I'm confident that Nigel is right as the leader of the Party of Reform, and he is making the right decisions for the future, even if, as I say, they are unpopular right now. Well, Kevin in Lincolnshire, I think the point about making decisions is that they have to be right. It's unpopular is one thing, as long as it's right. But if it's unpopular and wrong, then that is disaster time, isn't it? Let's get a voice note from Nigel. Not that one.
Good morning, mate. Nigel from Peebles. Just listen to Ben Habib. Makes entire sense, although calling for Nigel Farage to stand down, I think, is one step too far. I think the person who quite clearly is coming out of this that is causing the problem is Zia Yusuf. I think he needs to go, and I think Nigel and Rupert need to sit in the same room, have this out live on a YouTube conference so we can all see, and we can all see we've got the party back on a straight and narrow.
Nigel, I think I've heard you say that before, and it might be something that they will do, but given the fact that they've been quite, sort of, shall we say, secretive about what their policies are and what their next moves are going to be, I don't think they're going to be doing any public meetings anytime soon, I have to say. Let's talk now to Rear Admiral Chris Parry, front page of The Sun today. Chris, very good morning to you. Has Hellfire, an extraordinary scene in the North Sea, just off the coast of Hull. One person was missing. I think everybody else is accounted for, thankfully. A tanker from abroad bumps into the Stena Immaculate. They both ignited, spilling aviation fuel into the North Sea. I heard you yesterday speaking on a show, I think it was Jeremy's show, talking about how at least it's not crude oil. It could be worse. It's bad enough that it's aviation fuel, but it won't perhaps be as long-lasting and toxic as crude oil would have been.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's still a bit of a problem for the local area and also the local ecosystem. There's no question about that. But yeah, it could have been a lot worse. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the Torrey Canyon.
Me too, yeah. I was there. I remember walking around in Cornwall looking at it. It was horrible.
Yeah, and it took years to clear that up and killed lots of wildlife. So yeah, we're fortunate in that respect. But accidents like this shouldn't happen, Mike. There's clearly something gone wrong at a number of levels. There are so many technological aids to stop you doing this. And it looks just like a car that's been driven into a supermarket car park, frankly, and hit the nearest car that it's come across.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine, isn't it? I mean, we had a text in very early in this morning from somebody who obviously was an expert on maritime sort of safeguards, and there was, I think, 7 different things that he mentioned that would be put into play so that you could see where you were going, so that you didn't hit anything when you were unsighted because of fog or anything like that. I mean, it just beggars belief. I mean, we're saying on the front of the Telegraph that the US has not ruled out foul play. I mean, do you think that could be a factor?
I think it's doubtful, Mike. If you look at the track of the Solong, the ship that actually collided with the tanker, it's on a steady course. It hasn't deviated, and frankly, it's ploughing basically the same route that it takes every time it goes down the East Coast, so I think it's unlikely, to tell you the truth. But you know, we don't know the facts yet, but it's a well-known anchorage. You don't go through without a lookout. I mean, I had an incident in the Gulf when I was commanding a destroyer. I was hooked up to one of my tankers and refueling, and we had a very large tanker come towards us, and it didn't deviate. It was supposed to give way to us. We were obviously slightly constrained. In the end, I had to do an emergency breakaway, and we traced after it, and there was nobody on the bridge. And somebody had gone and done something else. It was on autopilot and heading through. So it does happen occasionally, and I suspect that human error or negligence is at the heart of this.
I mean, you'd like to think that, given that the English Channel, I know it's slightly north of that particular part of the ocean, is the busiest sea channel in the world, that somebody might actually be bothered to take control. Well,
you should at all times. I mean, you know, the rules for actually running ships at sea are quite explicit about keeping a good lookout and things like that. So I think the insurance costs are going to be huge here, to tell you the truth. Mike, could I just mention the Rupert Lowe business?
Yes, please do, yeah.
I know both Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage. They both act in the best interests of this country. And, you know, my experience with Rupert Lowe is he's a thoroughly decent, motivated chap. And I think it's a shame that this has happened. And I think it's probably healthy for our democracy that Reform is a strong party, to tell the truth.
Oh, no question at all. But I worry that this business is actually going to ruin the whole project, and that it won't recover from it.
Well, you know, it's a job for the chairman to sort out. You know, I mean, the other parties have just as sort of frightful spats between various people, but it's sorted out by the whips and the chairman. You know, I think reporting one of your colleagues to the police before there's any real evidence is, I must say, is a bit left-wing.
Yeah. Well, it does seem very unreform-like, doesn't it? It's like, what the hell are you doing? What are you thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, just finally, on Ukraine, I'm not one of those who thinks we should be sending troops to Ukraine. The best peacekeepers for Ukraine are Ukrainians. We should arm them to the teeth, and we should put troops in neighbouring NATO countries at high readiness. All this talk of us being able to put troops into Ukraine is totally fatuous, and I'm afraid, you know, I disagree with Hamish, who came on before. We're putting ourselves in real danger if we did that. Yeah, absolutely right. Chris, I don't know why I'm here. I mean, you can just interview yourself. It's great. I mean, just give us a taste of everything that's on the menu this morning. Thank you very much indeed. A very, very interesting man. Rear Admiral Chris Parry there with his views on all manner of things, from reform to Ukraine to, of course, that hellfire in the North Sea just outside of Hull. Loads more coming up. This is Morning Glory. Back after the news.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sent his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are
Mr.
not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. The final hour of the show coming up to 3 minutes past 9. The sun is up. I mean, I can see out the window, but it doesn't look great, I have to say. I know sometimes you get bored probably with me telling you what the weather's like, because you can look out the window yourself. But no, and listen, we talk about it because it was so beautiful at the weekend. It felt as though there was a new beginning going on. But there's lots of things to trouble us this morning, I'm afraid. Not least the reform row, which is still going on. And this statement has been issued this morning by Rupert Lowe's basically staff. 7 people who talk about how great he is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 7 people. I got that right. Who talk about how great he is, how they've never seen any violent or vicious behaviour from him. They call him a good, decent, honest man. They say that, to put it simply, we all love working for him. We would like to put our sincere appreciation to him on the record. Wider allegations of bullying are entirely untrue. It puts an absolute dagger to the heart of the argument being made by Nigel Farage that what we have here is a sort of slightly unhinged man who doesn't seem to be in control of his actions or his emotions. Doesn't sound like that at all. So what we don't know is what the next move will be. Nigel Farage talks about an investigation going on. The police have been called. You know, all sorts of things are happening. But quite frankly, after seeing Rupert Lowe being interviewed by Dan Wootton last night on his show, the man looks completely in control of his faculties. He sounds like a man who is very sincere about what he wants to do and why he wants to continue to remain an MP to save Britain from itself. All of those things are very, very important, and we will continue to seek the truth as far as we can get it. We've asked for Rupert Lowe to come on the show. So far he hasn't. We've asked for Nigel Farage to come on the show. So far he hasn't. We'll see whether we get to the bottom of this before the Reform Party completely destroys itself in a great big ball of flames. I mean, it's just extraordinary, isn't it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. Here's what you've been saying about it this morning.
Just seen that interview with Farage that you've played, and I've seen it for the first time. On my first instinct is he's lying through his teeth there.
I find it absolutely insane. They need to get a grip, grow up and get a backbone.
I think Nigel possibly should consider standing down, allowing the party to be a total democratic party where they can elect a leader.
I think the only way forward is for Farage to resign.
Quite extraordinary that that's the kind of thing we're getting here. People who vote reform, people who have voted reform in the past, people who would promise to vote reform in the future are saying Nigel Farage should resign. It's quite extraordinary. 0344 499 1000. We've also got stories this morning regarding all manner of things, but foreigners, particularly foreigners from Afghanistan, Eritrea and Iraq, commit a quarter of all sex crimes in this country, despite the fact that only about 9.5% of them are actually here in this country. 4,000 dinghy illegals have now arrived, which is a new record for this year alone. We're going to be talking about what's going on in the North Sea with that ship problem, and also the BBC, a £5 million bill for scandal. This is Talk. Now, also, news for you, if you've been looking for it. Breaking news, in fact. Round 2 of the Morning Glory bumper sticker giveaway is here. Join the Common Sense Revolution. Get your hands on a free limited edition sticker. I know an awful lot of you asked for them after them before, but we ran out very quickly because there was a massive demand, an absolute run on the stickers that we had. So we printed a new batch. Here's how you get your hands on one. Head over to talk.tv/sticker, put in your name and address, and we'll send one straight out to you. Just make sure that when you get it, you take a photo of it on your vehicle and post the picture either on social media or send it in to us here at Talk. 0344 499 1000 is the number you can send it into, of course, on WhatsApp. Supplies are limited, though, so head over to talk.tv/sticker now. And if you have requested one the first time around, you will get one. Don't worry, we are going to just keep continuing to print these things until nobody wants them anymore, which is probably going to be quite a long and drawn-out scenario. Lots of you getting them, lots of you putting on your car. It's absolutely fantastic. It is the home of common sense, and you can be a member of the Common Sense Revolution. Now, we've been talking about Nigel Farage, we've been talking about Rupert Lowe. Let's have a look at what Nigel Farage told ITV last night.
Look, there is a behavioural problem here. There has been a behavioural problem for some months. Outbursts, anger, that kind of thing. Frankly, I've tried to put it all to the back of my mind. We've all tried to put it to the back of our minds. And as I say, I'm not prejudging anything on these allegations of a bullying culture going on in his offices. But I put it to you, any party who had a senior figure that was facing those accusations would have to act in some way. Mr. Lowe has made a whole series of comments about the KC's investigation, all of which have proved to be wrong. He's then out today saying there is no accusation against him at all, when actually there is. So I'm afraid we're not quite getting the full facts of this. Look, you know what? I could do without this. It's a huge distraction for the party, for me, for everybody.
Yeah. Well, here's what Rupert's team had to say this morning. We would all like to put our sincere appreciation to him on the record. Wider allegations of bullying are entirely untrue. These were only issued after the two individuals in question admitted to separate serious offences and the disciplinary process had started against both of them. They are vexatious complaints, sadly submitted to cause as much damage as possible. We are all uncomfortable to see processes designed to protect staff weaponised in such an unpleasant and malicious fashion, not just tarnishing Rupert's name unfairly, but also our office and subsequently us. This is not fair. Nobody from Reform has ever raised these concerns or any about Rupert with any of us before this investigation. If they were so concerned about Rupert's behaviour, why were we not warned? Well, I think that's a fair question, isn't it? Before we speak to Andrew Griffiths, who is, of course, Shadow Business Secretary in the Tory party, let us have a look at what old Ed Miliband's been up to. He's been out and about again, making those promises. Check it out.
The truth is, our country remains in the grip of fossil fuel markets controlled by petrostates and dictators. That's why our energy bills are so high. There is an answer: clean, homegrown power that we control. But to bring it to people's homes, we need to build the transmission infrastructure to make that happen. Now, we believe that if you live close to that new grid infrastructure, you should see direct benefit in your energy bills. And with the plans we're announcing today, you'll get up to £250 a year off your bills. I know this won't satisfy everyone, but it is a recognition that if you host clean energy infrastructure, you should benefit from it.
Yeah, there he goes again. You'll get up to, right, remember the words, up to £250 off. Do you remember when he said you'd get up to £300 off? Turned out it wasn't true. Turned out he doesn't say that anymore. So he's now come up with the new ruse to say if you put some kind of wind farm in your back garden, you'll get 250 quid off the energy it produces. Brilliant. Andrew Griffiths is here. He knows a thing about business. Andrew, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I mean,
good morning,
can we believe a word that comes out of Ed Miliband's mouth?
No. I mean, if there's someone who's been consistently wrong, I'm afraid it's Ed Miliband, and his energy policies are just ruinous. I mean, in my brief for business, I mean, there's just no way that British business, particularly manufacturing, can compete on a world stage with the sort of energy prices that we've had. Now, obviously some of that is due to world affairs, to be fair, but he's making it worse, not better. We've got 3.3 billion barrels of extractable reserves under our feet in the North Sea, and he and his government are doing everything possible to frustrate our ability to use that.
Right. It doesn't seem to have much to say about the millions and millions of gallons of aviation fuel that appears to be burning its way through the North Sea at the moment.
No, nor indeed all the flights that he and his government have been taking in the name of protecting our climate. But,
No.
But look, we've got, there's bigger fish to fry actually, because, well, I mean, it's not much bigger than the cost of energy in fairness. But right now, today in Parliament, we are taking the fight to Labour 2 days of debate where they're going to try and jam through this employment rights bill, taking us straight back to the 1970s, something Tony Blair and Gordon Brown never saw fit to do. They never went back to try and do that, because they saw that we've got a fair balance in this country between, quite rightly, the rights of workers, even their rights to be members of trade unions, but also making sure those unions behave well, and the rights of employers and the incentives to give people a chance of work.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, this is the problem, isn't it, with the whole net zero crusade? And I don't know where the Tories are yet. I'll ask you about that in a second. But in terms of, what we are being promised as this kind of, green and pleasant land that we're going to have created for us by the net zero, ridding us of fossil fuels and making us more reliable on all manner of renewables. I mean, it's not really a sustainable model. And I'm waiting for the day, hoping for the day that the Tories will say, you know what, we are actually going to ditch all of this net zero nonsense, because it's bad for the country, it's bad for the economy, and it's bad for the people.
Yeah, well, look, I'll let the brilliant energy secretary or Kemi come and talk to you about the policy when and if it changes. But it is absolutely the case, and as I say, I'm very clear in my mind that British business need competitive energy prices. In the price of energy in Birmingham, West Midlands, is 4 times that of Birmingham, Alabama in the US. How is our manufacturing sector supposed to compete on that basis, Mike? They simply can't. So watch this space in terms of how our policy changes over time. But there are so many different attacks on the competitiveness of this country from this government. It's one reason why every 45 minutes another millionaire is leaving. Yeah.
I mean, and also there's a lot of millionaires who won't be millionaires for much longer, because they're going to be taxed up the wazoo to such an extent they won't have as much money as they used to have. But, Jeremy Kyle mentioned this yesterday. Given the troubles that are going on inside of reform at the moment, shouldn't the Tories be a little bit more proactive on kind of, helping them with their demise, if you like?
Look, I mean, I don't want to do anyone else's, work for them, or we've got a big job of work to do. We are the official opposition in the constitution of this country. That's kind of an audition for government. If we can demonstrate, as I hope in the Commons later, that we are holding this government to account, we're putting down amendments to try and mitigate the worst damage of their bills, their attack on employment in this country. We'll vote against that bill. That's what we can control. Now, if anybody who's dedicated to the end of this socialist government wants to join the Conservative Party, there's procedures and ways that you join, but I would welcome that. We need the broadest possible group motivated to replace this government, stand for election as Conservatives, and end this terrible socialist government.
There's a group of Tory peers, I understand, who are trying to block the Chagos Islands deal. I'm not quite sure where that Chagos Islands deal is at the moment, but I mean, would they get the support of the shadow cabinet at this point?
110%, if you're allowed to have such a mathematically challenge number. Yes, look, that is our clear policy. We think it's the wrong deal. This is not a deal that the Conservatives would ever have done. Yes, they open talks, but you can talk for a very long time without reaching agreement, and there would have been no agreement whatsoever on this sort of basis. The country can't afford it. Rachel Reeves has crashed the economy, so we definitely can't afford it, and this is a really important sovereign territory.
Well, it really is, and it's very strategic as well when it comes to the US of A and also the Chinese too. I mean, it seems like madness for them to be pressing ahead with it, the Labour government.
Yeah, I mean, look, one by one as you go around the cabinet table, I'm afraid to say, we've got a farming minister who's going along with Ed Miliband's desire to build solar farms where we should be growing food. We've got a foreign secretary who's trying to reduce our foreign overseas territories. And I'm afraid to say we've got an attorney general who seems to have spent his entire career supporting and aiding and abetting people who have been enemies of the British state, or people who have no right to stay here but are using the legal system to try and elongate their stay.
Yes.
In my domain of business, tragically, there's no one with deep experience of business in that room speaking up. If there was, maybe we wouldn't be having this 250 pages of red tape employment bill.
And how is Jonathan Reynolds still in the cabinet, having pretended that he was a solicitor, having lied about being a solicitor, having misrepresented himself as a solicitor in all sorts of various domains? How has he still got a job?
Well, you raise a very good point. I mean, I've done everything, I've tried to raise this. I've written to the Prime Minister, I've written to the Prime Minister's advisor on ministerial standards. At the end of the day, people have to be judged by the standards and the appointments they make. But he wouldn't be in my cabinet on the basis of having misrepresented himself. That is, as you know, a criminal offence, and the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, I hope, in defending the reputation of the profession, will uphold standards themselves.
Well, you'd like to think so. Supposedly he's going to be fine, but we haven't heard about that either. Andrew, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Andrew Griffith, MP, Shadow Business Secretary there. His opposite number, Jonathan Reynolds, of course, still in a job, despite the fact that he's admitted lying about being a solicitor, which is, in fact, a criminal offence. Extraordinary stuff. Let's talk to David Spencer now, Head of Crime and Justice at the Policy Exchange. David, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. You wrote yesterday about the Sentencing Council and their remarkable letter to Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary. They seem to think that that they're not really answerable to her, and they may well be in the right to say that, but you called the letter remarkable. Tell us why.
It is remarkable, and this sort of incident is why calls and beliefs around two-tier justice are being fuelled. People will look at the background to this incident, where the Sentencing Council have produced guidelines which say that judges should take a different approach with ethnic minority or transgender defendants after they're convicted, when they look at who to get a pre-sentence report for. And people will rightly ask the question, well, why for that group of people and not for everyone else?
Right.
Just the whole thing sounds like and looks like two-tier justice. And then to compound it, we then see that the Justice Secretary quite rightly was calling this into question and saying that she was going to have a look at this, and she's absolutely right to do that. And in response, the Sentencing Council double down their approach and then start to question what right ministers or Parliament have in relation to this at all. It is, as I said yesterday, absolutely remarkable. And I have to say, the original sin here was probably about 15, 16 years ago. Parliament and the government of the day, back in 2009, saw fit to hand over all of these powers to an unelected, unaccountable quango. And the reality is what Parliament now needs to do is reassert itself and say, actually, while judges, quite rightly, when sentencing, can impose sentences for individual cases, the guidelines, the maximum sentence and these sorts of issues should be decided by Parliament. And people seem to forget, or certainly the members of the Sentencing Council seem to have forgotten, that it is Parliament in our democratic country that is supreme, not unelected quangocrats.
That's right. And it seems to be a more regular occurrence now, though, for lawyers and for judges in particular, activist judges, some would call them, to be sort of getting in the face of politicians and deliberately going against what you might regard as government policy. I mean, we've seen these immigration panel judges recently, making sure that people can stay in this country despite the fact that they're clearly dangerous, or they're clearly criminal, or they're clearly people who should be deported, but they appear to be unswathed and unadorned by any kind of belief in what our country's laws actually state.
And in this case, with the Sentencing Council, it's even worse, actually, because what appears to be happening is that they're using their own resources, Sentencing Council, public publicly funded resources to essentially, in their letter, lobby for the powers that they should and shouldn't have, which Parliament decide. I mean, that seems to me an astounding way for a public body to behave, to be lobbying in a letter for how Parliament should legislate to deal with. And you mentioned the foreign nationals piece. Well, Policy Exchange published a paper last week which demonstrated that the cost of crime to the British economy is £250 billion a year, about 10% of our GDP. One of the recommendations we made there was that foreign nationals who come to this country and commit criminal offences should be deported. And I think that's entirely appropriate, given that the cost to our economy and our country is £250 billion every single year.
Yeah, right. And who could forget Lady Justice Carr, who is Baroness Carr, of course, Sue Carr, who had a go both at the Prime Minister and Kemi Badenoch, Leader of the Opposition, for daring to question a decision that was made by one of these judges and more or less told them, back off, you shouldn't be giving us any grief.
And again, absolutely remarkable, because this discussion took place between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition in Parliament, democratically elected representatives there who represent the people. And, it is Parliament that is supreme. And frankly, if the discussion can't be had there, then where would the Chief Justice like the discussion to be had? It is a remarkable set of circumstances, and it really is time for Parliament to demonstrate that it is the supreme body, as opposed to other groups, whether they be quangos, unelected judges, whoever they might be.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me play a little voice note I've got here from Kim, who's been listening and watching intently. See what you make of this.
Morning, Mike. Kim from near Bristol here. On the note about people who are from an ethnic minority getting lesser sentences, I mean, it's just flat out obviously racist and unfair for a start. But even if you were to say, oh, there's an argument for it being fair somehow, I'm just wondering how much of an ethnic minority do you need to be to qualify? So obviously, if your parents are from a non-UK country, I guess you could say that would qualify, certainly if you are. But what about grandparents? Great-grandparents, would that count? Can I claim my Viking ancestry? What about if I'm Welsh? Just asking. Cheers, Mike. Keep going.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it is. I mean, once you open the door on this kind of nonsense, it could lead anywhere, couldn't it?
I honestly don't know the answer to Kim's question, I have to confess. But the reality here is that, and the crucial error that gets made here, is the presumption that disproportionality is the same as discrimination. And that is simply not the case. There may be all sorts of reasons why different people from different ethnicities or different faiths or cultures, there are different rates of sentencing. There can be all sorts of reasons for that. But the automatic presumption that what is at hand here is racism is flawed. And it is part of an ideology which I'm afraid has embedded itself in the criminal justice system and all over the state and really needs to be wrenched out.
Yeah. Well, when you look at the story that came as a result of a Freedom of Information request to the Ministry of Justice itself about sex crimes being committed by foreigners, up to a quarter of sex crimes being committed by people from foreign countries, foreign nationals, and of course not just sex crimes but also drug crimes, theft as well, violent crimes, all disproportionately represented by foreign criminals. And so the idea is that, if you're going to be giving these people a lesser sentence on the grounds that they're from Congo, despite the fact that they've committed more violent attacks than anybody else in Britain, that's entirely wrong-headed, isn't it?
Well, this really doesn't seem to me to be a situation which is filled with complexity. If you are a foreign national and you come to the United Kingdom and you commit a crime, then you should be deported.
Right.
Now, if your sentence
shouldn't be controversial, that should it?
That should not be controversial. If you're sentenced to a community sentence or a suspended sentence, then straight away you should be deported. If you're sentenced to a term of imprisonment, then you should be in prison. And frankly, I don't see why we should be paying for rehabilitation or any of that sort of stuff, because you, at the end of your sentence, will be deported. That should be what happens. That is what Policy Exchange has recommended a number of times now. I'm afraid I struggle to see the complexity in that.
Yeah, absolutely right. David, great to talk to you. Common sense personified. Thank you very much indeed. Head of Crime and Justice at the Policy Exchange. That story, by the way, Britain's accounted for 12,619 sex offence convictions, representing a rate of 2.66 per 10,000 of their population in England. However, based on convictions per 10,000 of the population, Afghans have got 77 convictions at the top, with a rate of 59 per 10,000, 22.3 times that of people from Britain. They were followed by Eritreans, who accounted for 59 convictions at a rate of 53.6 per 10,000 population. So they're way over and above the norm. And obviously, this is a massive problem. But these judges want to give them lesser sentences on the grounds that they're foreign, or they're from, a different ethnic minority. Well, I'm sorry, you can get stuffed, mate. Foreign criminals need to be locked up for longer than British criminals so that they don't do it again. And then they need to be deported, right? It's not difficult. As David Spencer said, it's not controversial to want to do that, for heaven's sake. Let's get a voice note from Kevin.
Hi, Mike. Brilliant show. Kevin from Cornwall. Just on the reform debacle, if you like. I'm amazed that no one else seems to realise that there's I don't know, it's a group of just egos, isn't it? And you have to be very egotistic to be a leader of a party. And in the limelight all the time, people, patting you on the back and saying how great you're doing. Your ego will get boosted. I just wish Rupert Lowe would bury the hatchet with Nigel Farage, and Nigel Farage would bury the hatchet, metaphorically, with Rupert Lowe. Just get on to rescuing this country. By God, it needs rescuing.
It really does, Kevin. Thank you very much indeed. A little bit over enthusiastic, shall we say, with some of his descriptions there. So apologies if anybody heard anything they didn't want to hear. But I think it's perfectly permissible to use that kind of language given what's going on. Ian says this, Mike, I think Rupert Lowe would make a great Prime Minister. Nigel Farage knows this, and this is a power play to stop Rupert Lowe snapping at his heels for leadership. And one from Els Bells in Shropshire. I've just seen the interview Farage did with ITV. Hand on head, he's lying. Clearly, being a mum gives you a super talent of knowing when your kids are lying. If that was one of mine, he'd be grounded in his room without his PlayStation. Nigel is lying. That's simple to see. And Ian in Cheshire says this, I'm not sure that Mr Hoyle will be watching events in the North Sea, but he could be, as the loss of aviation fuel could curtail his gallivanting. Very true. If only it would. Apparently he's now recognised that he's made an error in accounting some of the flights that he took and some of the freebies that he took. So he's going to have to correct the record, according to him, which basically means he's admitted to lying. That's what I make it. Correcting the record. Are you really? Oh, you're correct. I'm correcting the record. When I told a lie yesterday, I'm going to correct the record because that was a lie. That's what correcting the record means, for heaven's sake. Absolutely ridiculous. This is Talk. Coming next, we're going to talk to the Taxpayers Alliance because there's more trouble at Mill.
home-grown meat or whatever, it does sound a bit sort of a bit unusual. But as you say, I think this is just a sort of normal evolution of technology. Look, there's lots of stuff that we do in our food system that if you deconstruct it feels a bit weird. I mean, there's a whole joke about don't look into a sausage factory. What I see with cultivated meat is a significant opportunity to make meat more cheaply and with much lower environmental impact. And I'm pretty glad that the FSA is actually on it, looking to regulate the industry sensibly and move forward quickly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Can I do that? Or I can do that. Yeah, it is the home of common sense. And there's your sticker. You can get one. Stick it on the back of your car. All you got to do is write to us on social media. You can send it to talk.tv/sticker and we'll send one out to you. You stick it on the back of your car and tell everyone that you're part of the revolution of common sense, which would be a great thing to do. Elliot Keck's here. Very good morning to you, Elliot.
Morning.
Head of Campaigns at Taxpayers Alliance, of course. Much to talk about this morning, including the latest on Lindsay Hoyle, who we're not letting wriggle off the stick just yet. But let's talk first of all about Keir Starmer. He's saying the benefit system is unfair and unsustainable, or and indefensible even. Let's just get a quick voice note, though, from Ken on reform.
Morning, Mike. Ken in Dorset here. Well, the 4.5 million people that voted for reform at the last election have been royally kicked in the teeth. All this infighting and squabbling has removed reform from being the alternative party government away from the uni party, and have just handed Labour a second term in office. Thanks, guys. Thanks for nothing.
Yeah, there's a lot of anger out there about reform, I'm afraid to say. Nobody can quite work out why they're doing it. It just seems mad, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's particularly disappointing because Rupert Lowe's been one of the most active MPs in Parliament. I think
particularly
he's made
asking
something like half of their contributions.
Yeah, and asking some of the questions that you guys would ask if you were there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So to lose that, I think is going to be damaging. But listen, there's also no doubt that Nigel Farage is also a brilliant politician, brilliant leader. So it's a shame that you've got these two clearly very, very capable politicians that have fallen out with each other when the country needs them to get along, I'm afraid.
Well, this is it, and as that Ken just said there, I mean, millions of people voted for them hoping that they would see something different, as opposed to the usual old cobblers of infighting and kind of fighting like rats in a sack and all of that. But let's talk about the benefit system. Unfair, indefensible, says Starmer.
Yeah, listen, I think he's right, but I mean, there's been a few things, hasn't there, since the Labour Party have come in where they've sounded good. There's been a little bit of good rhetoric. They've showed a little bit of ankle. Talk about defence spending. You talk about the NHS. Talk about a bit of planning stuff, and they've showed a bit of ankle, and then they've stopped there. So defence spending, they're talking about 2.5%. Is the Chagos being included? So I think on this, benefit spending does need to be cut. It's gone up way too much since the pandemic. Let's see what Labour Party actually do about it.
Well, this is the thing. I think they're going to find it quite difficult because whenever it happens, I mean, Conservative governments have tried to do it as well, clamping down on people who are too sick to work, doing more kind of investigations and making people go to offices to be inspected to see whether they can walk and all that kind of stuff. They always seem to catch the wrong people and punish the people who actually do need benefits rather than punishing the people who are on the take.
Yeah, that's always a problem. But like 36 billion to 48 billion is the rise in working age benefits since the pandemic. No other country in the developed world has seen this. Every other country is basically back to where it was before the pandemic. Yeah. That's heading to 65 billion quid. Something needs to be done. You've also got, and this is very, very concerning, you've got this sort of what people are calling the Boris wave of immigration. Millions of people that came under the Boris Johnson reforms. And in the next couple of years, they're going to get indefinite leave to remain, and they're going to start getting access to this system, a system which we know, if you know how to game it, and a lot of people don't know how to game it, a lot of people do lose out, but if you do know how to game the system, clearly you can get access to quite a bit of taxpayer cash when you probably shouldn't be getting any at all.
Well, I mean, I was listening again to Jeremy Carl's show last night, and the story that sort of summed up the state of Britain was the couple who came back from their holiday in Europe with a sort of illegal migrant in the back of the trailer they were dragging behind the car. And the illegal migrant gets discovered by the police, gets taken off and put in a hotel, and they get fined 1,500 quid. For something they didn't even know they'd done.
Well, he's probably staying in a nicer hotel than the house that they live in, to be honest.
And as somebody said who called in, you know, I think it's the first sort of instance of Keir Starmer, you know, smashing the smuggling gangs, because, I mean, these two poor women, this poor bloke and his wife, were the first people who have actually been done for it.
Yeah, but and as you said, that's the case with the benefit system. Often, you know, when they make these benefit changes, it's those that don't have the wherewithal to challenge, that don't know how to use the system, that end up getting hurt, and those that are taking the mick, frankly, and there are a lot of taking the mick, often get away with it. So the devil would be in the detail, and so far Labour have been pretty terrible on the detail, Mike.
They have, and I mean, the trouble is, we had Ed Miliband once again announcing just there before earlier on in this hour, £250, up to £250. He always is careful.
It's always up to
£250 is going to be made available if you put some kind of sustainable energy source on your land, i.e. if you've got a garden and you stick a windmill in it, you get 250 quid off your energy bill. This is absolute rubbish, isn't it?
It's a bit like when you go to the sales and it says up to 70% off, but the only thing that's 70% off is 4 sizes too big and in the colour you don't want.
And you don't want it, exactly. Exactly right. Let's talk about Lindsay Hoyle, because I got this from Rob, who says, "Morning, Mike. The Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, should be just called Just Stop Hoyle, and he should be renamed the Sponger of the House." I mean, this guy has done himself a massive disfavour, hasn't he, by spending 250,000 quid's worth of taxpayers' money for no apparent reason.
Yeah, and people have been, I think, reluctant to criticise the Speaker occasionally because nobody misses John Bercow, right? I mean, he is clearly, in terms of the job of being Speaker, he's better than John Bercow. But listen, it's not only his hand has been found in the cookie jar, he's emptied it out, cleared out the pantry, and ordered himself a nice takeaway using Mummy and Daddy's credit card as well.
He's gone to Singapore to buy a new cookie jar.
Singapore. It's absolutely shocking, some of this spending. I mean, you know,
it's incredible. Well, this is what I was saying, that, you know, if you go to a place where you're supposedly the ambassador for whatever it is that you do, normally speaking, the governments of those countries will pay for you to go, won't they?
Well, you'd think so, and certainly I'd like to see a little bit more than that, and I'd like to see the Speaker consider whether maybe he could, you know, address these conferences or address these events via Zoom. And certainly, I mean, you look at, he has not taken, as far as we can tell, a single non-business class flight since 2022. That means he's taken business class to Dublin, to Gibraltar to, you know, wherever it is. Okay, fair enough. If you really have a vital piece of diplomacy somewhere like Australia, I don't think anybody expects you, the Speaker of the House of Commons, to be in coach. I understand that, but 250 grand in 3 years when the John Bercow, it took 10 years. I mean, come on. Come on. Let's
and
get
apparently
real here.
now the reason he's in the papers today is because he has to correct the record, which for somebody like him is a real big deal, because basically his office said yesterday had been an administrative error, and it would be corrected to make it clear how taxpayers' money was spent. And this was about one of his jaunts to Gibraltar. And the thing that I found also interesting about his trips to Gibraltar is that I think all 4 of them didn't register anywhere where he stayed. And it was unknown where he stayed. Now, either that means that he didn't take his wife, or he did take his wife and they stayed with a friend, or he was supplied with a house somehow. You know, there's a lot of questions.
And every time we do know where he stays, it tends to be places like the Four Seasons, right? I mean, he's always
in
booking
Jordan, very
the
nice,
most glamorous accommodation that he can.
I had a look at the one in the Cayman Islands, which
nice,
looks very nice. Lovely. So it's a spa and everything.
It does smack of a holiday. Far too many of these trips smack of a holiday where he's you know, tagging along and sticking a speaker engagement on, and then but really actually he's using it as a holiday. I don't know if that is the case. I think there does need to be an investigation. We don't know who would investigate
Who does
him.
he answer to?
Well, I think we're a little unclear from that. Certainly some of the reporting, it's not entirely clear who would investigate him, but I think, you know, he should be proactive about this, and he should be, you know, organising this investigation to himself, an independent one, to ensure that genuinely this is all above board. Take the Gibraltar trips. He's the Chancellor of the university there. Why aren't the university paying for those trips?
Exactly right. And he says in the parliamentary official log that he took himself and 3 staff members, raising questions about who had paid for his wife to attend, quizzed by the Mail. His office said the University of Gibraltar actually paid for his wife and him. But nevertheless, he still claimed £4,100 for the trip, including flights and including accommodation, and £700 for food and drink.
That's
all right for
I think
some,
there's another
isn't it?
case where he spent £500 on an extra bag.
Yeah. so he could bring back some freebies, presumably.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just beggars belief. But so, I mean, you know, I'm not going to let this one go.
No, you shouldn't.
I think he'd like us to let it go.
I'm sure he very much would
But I
like
think
you
this
to let
is,
it go.
in many ways, worse than actually some of the MPs who charge all sorts of expenses and, you know, charge for pencils and charge for toilet paper.
You do need pencils in a parliamentary office, even if, you know, maybe they
do.
a few too many.
But, you know, you might even consider buying the odd one yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they're not as if they're badly paid. Were they 94,000 now?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good deal of money, isn't it?
It is, but so is the Speaker. And
here's a question for you, right? Because I've wondered about this and I haven't been able to get anybody to answer it, and I don't know whether you know the answer. But you know these new unitary authorities that have been set up, like, for example, in Sussex, which is a particular bugbear of mine. They're going to have what would appear to be a mayor who's going to be settled somewhere in Brighton. They're putting together all kinds of different district councils like Rother and a whole bunch of other places. They're going to encompass West Sussex and East Sussex. And we keep hearing nebulously from various politicians who talk about this that we're going to save money. I don't see how you're going to save money doing that unless you fire people.
Unitaries can save money. You've often got, you know, where you don't have unitaries, you've got two layers of council, so you do have some duplication. You've got more.
But does that mean that some of those people will go then?
Well, that's the key question. And will they go? If they do go, how big are the payouts going to be? The unitaries can save money. There are examples where it have saved money. Often it just leads to much larger bureaucracies, higher paid staff.
Right. Because they've all got. I mean, I travel around in Sussex quite a lot.
It's mixed. It really is.
And you can come across, you know, council buildings all over the place.
Yeah.
And so, for example, would Rother Council do away with their building? Would other councils do away with their buildings and they'll all move to Brighton? It's not clear.
Yeah, and when, you know, when we've researched this, we've found examples of unitaries that have been successful in saving money, but also examples where it hasn't worked quite so well.
Interesting. Elliot, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Elliot Keck, Head of Campaigns at Taxpayers Alliance, where I'm going a bit later on, actually, because I'm going to do a podcast, which I'll tell you about later. I'm not sure what it's about yet, because nobody's told me. Liam has got something to say about reform.
Morning, Mike. Liam from Kent. On the reform thing, I'm just a little bit disappointed. Obviously, we really needed them, and we don't need them arguing amongst themselves. But on a lighter note, I'd like to put myself forward for the leader of reform, you know, put my name out there, say first thing we're going to do is leave the ECHR, and the second thing we're going to do is declare a national emergency. Because since no one can speak English, all these people that can't speak English, I think one of the first things I'd be doing is sending them home. Anyway, Mike, have a great show. Going to apply for a bumper sticker for the old work van. All the best.
Top man. Liam, well played. Was that with your Siri talking to you there, telling you to shut up while you're driving? Steve says this. Amesbury, this is the Labour MP, of course, says he's resigning at the earliest opportunity. Wasn't that the day he was charged, not months after, when he's trousered thousands more MP salary? It's true. I mean, again, Elliot Keck's still here. I mean, what's wrong with these people? Do they have no sense of moral turpitude at all?
Yeah, it does look a little like he's dragged it out, hasn't he? And he stayed on as long as possible.
He could have resigned.
So he can get an extra couple of months.
He could have resigned even before he was charged, because he knew what he did. You know, punched a guy while he was sitting on the ground. You know, repeatedly. It's not as if he was going to plead not guilty, because we was all caught on video. Unbelievable. One here from John, because we're going to have some tales to tell about these meters, I'm sure. John in Lincolnshire says, I've had 4 gas and 4 electric smart meters, and they've all failed to work. Now I'm told because I've had 8 in total of these things and had an off-gem complaint upheld, they won't fit a new one. Like it's my fault. That's ridiculous. Yeah, I'm getting harassed by the bloody electricity companies at the moment, because they want to put in some kind of meter, a new meter, because the old meter won't measure the difference between night and daytime use. I don't know. I've no idea. Anyway, I'm having a massive row at the moment. I've changed supplier like twice in a week. This is Talk. It's nearly 10 o'clock. Blimey. 9:45. We'll be back after this.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:47. I'm Mike Graham. Julie Hotley-Brewer here, of course, in about 10 minutes' time to tell us what's coming up on her show. Lots and lots of things going on today, and she'll be keeping you abreast of all of it. Lots and lots of you have been really involved with this reform debate that we've been having. We spoke to Ben Habib a little bit earlier on, former, of course, deputy leader of reform, who said that when he was ousted as deputy leader, nobody even told him. And I think when Zia Youssef came in to be, you know, basically chairman, he didn't know about that either. Here's what he had to say.
He swung back in on the 3rd of June to leader of reform and started setting aside everything that Richard Tice, Rupert Lowe, myself and others had created, including, of course, me. And, you know, Rupert says he hasn't had a chance to speak to Nigel Farage. Well, let me tell viewers something really interesting. I haven't spoken to Nigel Farage once since he came back, since he appointed himself leader on the 3rd of June. I didn't even know he was going to appoint himself leader on the 3rd. I was the deputy leader at the time. I had no discussion about him coming back as leader. I had no forewarning. I found out during the press conference. And I talked to my team, including people like Kate Hoey, and I said to Kate, I asked Kate, I want to resign because this man has just come back. He's acting like a despot immediately, like he used to in the Brexit Party. I want to resign. And Kate Hoey said to me, Ben, don't do it. We're in the middle of a general election. Whatever gripe you've got with Nigel Farage, you have it out at the end of the general election. And I took her advice and the advice of my inner circle, who said, Ben, you've just got to toe the line during the general election. But behind the scenes, what I was doing was saying to Nigel Farage and to Richard Tice, who was obviously my leader, you know, he was the one who brought me into the party, you've got to democratize the party. I knew that this party could not succeed if it was left in the control of Nigel Farage. It needed, he could be the leader, sure, no problem with that. But you've got to have processes, checks and balances and everything else in place so that good people coming into the party have the ability to be heard, that he can't act like the despot, narcissistic despot that he is. And I've been banging that drum for the democratization of the party, not because of any personal interest. I couldn't care less. I genuinely couldn't care less about my personal political position. It's so that reform is able to bring in the kinds of people it needs to deliver the country from the precipice. And, you know, we're not in normal times, Mike. In normal time, you might just say, well, you know, get on a whole load of MPs, we'll form a government, we'll think about it later. We are in times where this country needs a 180-degree change in direction. You need proverbial Samsons in the next government. Each of them have to be Herculean, Samsonite in their ability to deliver the United Kingdom to safety. And Nigel would never allow them to do it because his narcissistic nature wants to cut down anyone that seems to be a rival. And I'm utterly convinced that Rupert himself had a mark on his back the minute Elon Musk endorsed him, because that for Nigel was like, oh my goodness, I've got a guy in the party who's more popular across the Atlantic than I am, and Rupert is proving to be more popular in the UK than Nigel Farage is, and he can't bear it, so he wants to take Rupert out. And so what I'm trying to say here is that no genuinely Samsonite Herculean people, the kind that are required to save this country, will be allowed to flourish in reform under Nigel. And to try and destroy Rupert, not just discredit him, but to destroy him, is unacceptable. And therefore, Nigel Farage should resign from reform.
A lot of people agreeing with Ben Habib this morning, a lot of people disagreeing with him, of course, as well. It really has ripped reform asunder, this row, and it can't go on forever. They're going to need to sort it out one way or the other, I have to say. One from Lynn in Essex, who says, I got home from work the other day and found a card through my door saying my water meter had been fitted. I hadn't asked or agreed to this. Has anyone else had this? Love your show. Well, Lynn, yeah, I mean, we've spoken about this before, and there's certainly been instances with electricity meters, smart meters, where people have actually broken into your house to put a meter in. In some cases, I think with water, you can put the meter outside the house, so they don't necessarily have to go inside to do it. But yeah, you're right. They shouldn't be doing it without your permission. And Alan in Middlesbrough says Lindsay Hoare should resign as Speaker and sign up as a travel correspondent with some elite travel organisation that describes idyllic luxury holidays and travel experiences for multi-millionaire retirees with an unlimited budget. He's got all the correct credentials. Order! 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 This is talk.
Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Lots of you sending in pictures of your sticker on the back of cars, which is all well and good. Absolutely brilliant stuff. This from David in Harold Wood. He says, I totally agree with the fact that Farage should go as soon as possible. I'll be voting for the SDP unless there is reform within reform. Farage is like a child who's thrown his toys out of the pram. Well, I mean, you know, so many people are saying that. It's quite surprising to me, really, because I think the mood music has changed since the end of last week when people were saying, yes, they support Rupert Lowe, but at the end of the day, you know, Nigel Farage is all about reform, and without him, they wouldn't have 5 MPs. People's opinions seem to be moving around on this quite a lot. Let's get a voice note from Darren on Ed Miliband.
Mike, Darren from Suffolk, great show as ever. Let's talk about Ed the Red Miliband this morning. Now, he's saying that the more green energy we've got, the lower our prices will be. Well, if we've got more green energy currently than anybody else in Europe, why are our prices the highest? Surely they would be the lowest. It doesn't make any sense. The more green energy we have, the lower our prices, the less dependency we have on the people holding us hostage for fossil fuels. But no, the people using more fossil fuels in other countries in Europe are actually cheaper. That's because maybe they're using their own fossil fuels and not bringing it in.
Not rocket science.
Well, you wouldn't think it is rocket science, but the trouble is that whatever we seem to do in this country, it seems to cost more money than it does everywhere else. Absolutely ridiculous. Let's talk to Tarquin, who's in London. Hi, Tarquin.
Mike, yeah, just say sorry to my bestie, Kevin. My phone broke about 2 weeks ago, so I've been offline. So if you see him, just apologise. There was the... Yeah, listen, this whole reform thing, Mike, this is the solution. This is the solution.
Go on.
We have a leadership election. Rupert, the Lothians versus the Faragians. And the 200,000 people, that they can vote, and then that will speak as to where the direction of the party should be headed. Because I think at the moment, Nigel has become then a liability, sadly. He is narcissistic, and I can understand why. He wants to be Trump 2.0, but I think we've gone beyond that. We either need a new party, the Common Sense Party, and compete with reform and see wins in a beauty contest, because there's more factions on the right, like the Bens and...
Yeah, but you don't want them to break up too much and make all sorts of different, views, do you?
Well, yeah, we do. We need to be radical because we're going to head into a ditch with Nigel. Sorry.
Okay. Are you surprised that you're saying that? I mean, are you finding that a surprise? Because I'm surprised that so many people are saying
we were united. Yeah, but the way that he did this hatchet job on Rupert, it was totally over the top.
Yeah, well, the killer for me today is this message from Rupert Lowe's basic sort of, staff, 7 people who basically said he's a good boss, he's a good man, he doesn't deserve what's happening to him, they love working for him, he cares deeply for us, he's unfailingly polite, he's courteous, he's loyal, he's done the things that he's being painted as, according to Nigel Farage.
Yeah, it's a resounding endorsement. He's a decent man. Everybody can see that. Why they've done what they've done. I think it's going to backfire on Richard Tice, even though he's a lovely chap. We all like Richard.
Yeah,
but I think he's wrong on this one, big time.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? Tarquin, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Julie Hartley-Brewers here. Very good morning.
Very good morning. I can't make head nor tail of this reform.
I've been very shocked this morning at the number of people who say Nigel Farage has to go.
I know, it's
quite
really interesting. But I think at the end of the day, the party only works with Nigel Farage as the leader.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't be where they are without him.
There's an element where everyone involved in reform is kind of someone who's refusing to compromise, because otherwise a lot of them will still be in the Tory party or in other parties. So there's an element